Hey, what's up?
Yo! Hello?
Can you hear me?
Oh god, I have push to talk on because I was playing Among Us. Hello!
Hey, what's up?
Sorry, I had a push to talk on for no reason at all. How you doing?
That's completely fine. And I'm doing pretty good. What about you?
Pretty okay, actually, apart from a persistent cough. All right, hit me up. Give me your contentions. How you doing?
Well, so your viewers, the people that are listening know, specifically during the video you did with the other fan from Temple who also called you about race, I think it was like a month and a half ago, you started a conversation with him where I'm going to quote you verbatim to give everybody context.
Sure.
You said to him, so I'm going to say, well, here are some racist things, and you're going to say, well, they didn't say they were racist, and I'm going to say, well, you have to infer that they are racist from their actions, what their general goals are. And you're going to say, you can't just call people racist because you assume they're racist. And I will say, well, no person is just going to say they're racist. You have to infer their behavior from their actions. And then he interrupted you and the conversation went on.
I feel like I nailed that. That's pretty much 90% of my discussions on race too. It basically boils down to the extent to which you can infer people's intentions, because very few people will just claim they're racist. But yeah, I feel like I put that one in the head pretty well. Though that conversation ended up going pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what you say there. I'm trying to, like, the main thing that I disagree with a lot of people on the left about, specifically the people that castigate the entire other side as racist, is I think there are simpler solutions or different solutions that you can come to that don't involve the person being racist. I think that's like a very good and effective cudgel to badger somebody with to basically take away their credibility. And
Well,
I think that's more or less what it's been used for.
Well, of course there are people who like aren't racist. I don't think that you should use that ubiquitously, because I mean, intuiting things like it's kind of a threshold. Like if you want to be really bad faith, you can intuit racist intent from like a lot of things that I wouldn't agree with. You'd have to make the argument, you know? So when I was talking about that, what I was more talking about is, say you have a person like Ben Shapiro, you know? Now, Ben Shapiro has never said, I am a racist. But Ben Shapiro will talk about how BLM is stupid, they need to shut up, how they're acting like thugs, how black music and rap isn't even real music, how wearing your pants down behind, like, by your knees is, like, degenerate, and having a flat cap is dumb. And if you add up everything that he's said, like, all these weird comments he's made, it feels like dude's just racist, and all of his policy positions align with those of a racist. And even though he hasn't said it, I think it's okay to criticize him based on that intuition, you know?
Well, two things. Do you think people have preferences?
Well, yeah, I imagine so.
Well, I mean, and the other, I'll get back to that. The other thing I wanted to say is, don't you think that a better explanation for conservatives doing policy that that creates racist outcomes, to use the argument that's commonly thrown at them from people on the left, don't you think a better explanation for that is they're conservatives versus they're racist? Because a conservative's ideology is to conserve. So the fact that they want to conserve broken systems that have brought about racism in the past, I think is better explained by the fact that, I mean, their ideology is to conserve versus them actually being racist.
Well, then you'd be making the argument that conservatism is inherently racist, which I would agree with. Yeah, if you want to conserve apartheid or slavery because you're interested in preserving social traditions, it doesn't really matter if that's being motivated by personal animosity towards black people, right? It's still pretty fucking racist.
I mean, I would agree if we were talking about, apartheid or slavery.
Yeah, but what if we're talking about a system where black people have about 1/40th the average household wealth as white people, or a system where they're disproportionately treated poorly by the police? As far as I'm concerned, anyone who makes the argument that systemic racism doesn't exist in this country is a racist, because there's no way to arrive at that conclusion without being willfully ignorant of the system that we live in, you know? But like what you just described right there, like, it's not that they're racist, it's just they're preserving racist tradition. Like, I guess this is a potato kind of thing to me, you know?
Well, I wouldn't exactly say conservatives are preserving racist. Like, I'm not saying that is like their main goal or what they set out to do, but I understand that that is like a byproduct of wanting to conserve previous systems. So I don't think that, is their intentional goal per se, but I'm willing to recognize that, like, the argument has at least a little bit of credibility to castigate them for, wanting to preserve systems that have unequal outcomes such as that. The
Well, sure,
if I
but
can
like, what's the
remember,
difference from my perspective, right? Like, I find two people who are trying to keep schools segregated, and I walk up and I'm like, "Hey, you're both are racist," and the guy on the left is like, "No, no, 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 no. I just like old systems. I don't care that it's black people being shit on. I just don't like new things." Like, what's the difference from my perspective between the two people I'm looking at? You know?
well, see that this is also why I told you in my initial email that I'm more left leaning, as are you, because I mean, I think back in the day, you would have a more valid argument towards conservatives than you do now. I think now the argument is not, well, I would describe it as disingenuous against conservatives, for lack of better words, but
Well, how so? I mean, you've made my argument for me, haven't you? You've kind of implicitly acknowledged that conservatives defend like racist positions. You're just saying they do so for a reason other than direct racial animosity. But for me,
I,
that's not a distinguishing factor.
well, I mean, you defend racist positions too. We all do to an extent.
Do
I
I?
mean, we So are you not of the like critical race theory suggests we all have preconceived racial biases, correct?
Yeah, but
Whether we
that's not
acknowledge them or not.
sure, but that's not defending racism. That's just acknowledgement of the way we're susceptible to social influence.
So you don't think that your preconceived racial biases have any effect on what you do or do not defend?
No, of course they do. But I'm not defending my biases. I'm just acknowledging that we all have them. I mean, even black people have them. It's not like a white person all racist against black people thing. We just a critical race theorist would acknowledge this about anything. We all have preconceived biases about all cultural elements. I mean, even the food that we like. But yeah, of course, there are definitely elements of my personality that have been molded by racial supremacy, but I don't defend those elements. I just acknowledge that they exist and I try to take them into account when I make decisions.
Well, I would say critical race theory is, to an extent, defending racism.
How?
Well, specifically, let me try to pin you down on a position. Do you know who Ibram X. Kendi is?
I'm afraid I don't know.
Well, he's one of the main people that is behind the progressive movement of critical theory, specifically critical race theory, that aspect of it. One of the things he says is the only way to combat
I remember this guy.
discrimination now is by discrimination later. So would you agree with that?
I mean, I imagine that given the fact that this guy is an extremely credentialed academic, his argument was probably a little more nuanced than that. What did he mean when he said that?
Hold on, let me Ibram. And I don't know what he meant when he said it because, well, it's basically an argument for affirmative action, more or less.
Oh.
To prevent racism, we have to discriminate against, like, in order, it's an equality of outcome argument, to be more specific.
Well,
In order to
affirmative
make
action,
everybody equal, we have to discriminate against some people.
affirmative action isn't necessarily about equality of outcome. It could be about equality of opportunity. I mean, you're trying to compensate for other factors that are reducing people's equality of opportunity. I mean, I can't speak to the quote that you've provided me. I think that affirmative action can apply in a non-racist way, but my definition of racism here might be different from yours.
I'm trying to pull up the quote now. Give me a second. It'll probably take me too long to find it since I don't have it on.
No, it's okay. It's fine. I mean,
fly, but
we can just discuss like the underlying idea. Even if this one guy like had a bad idea, like I don't think that's an indictment of critical race theory in general. Like critical race theory is like it's like trigonometry. Like you wouldn't say that like trigonometry as a field is bad because one mathematician came up with like a bad formula or they used their formula to create a weapon that ended up sarin bombing a hospital or something. You wouldn't like the theories, I think, are much more wide in the scope than some people like Tim Pool like to say. Tim Pool acts like critical race theory is a set of conclusions, when what it is in reality is a lens of analysis.
That's actually like, I'll give you some credit. That's something I learned specifically from you on his show because I had the same let's say misconceptions about critical race theory because it strikes me as like, especially the people that push it, the more vocal people that push it, such as Ibram X. Kendi and the white fragility lady, Robin DiAngelo.
Well,
and,
just so you know, we don't like the white fragility.
Yeah, I know. I've talked to a few of the other people that consider themselves Marxists, and Like usually, like I'll hear the woke movement, you know, praise something, and then I'll go to my Marxist friend and be like, "You believe this shit?" And they're like, "No, that's fucking stupid." Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on your show, but
You're totally allowed to. Do you understand what I mean when I say like affirmative action can be applied in a non-racist way?
I mean, yes, everything can be applied in the non. See, this is why I don't like the argument where you have to infer their behavior, because anybody pushing affirmative action, I could infer their behavior that they are racist as well. I mean, I think a compelling argument could be made for that, for the person being racist to push that, depending on how they push it. Same way you could apply the argument to, you know, a conservative, they may be racist depending on how they defend their ideas.
I don't really think people push conservative, or I'm sorry, I don't really think people push affirmative action because they're anti-white or anything. Like, if you're anti-white, I feel like there'd be much better ways of pushing that than like, because usually what affirmative action is like if you have two candidates. Okay, first of all, most of the people who benefit from affirmative action are white women, so we're not speaking to them. In a racial context, it's like if you have two resumes from equally qualified white and black people or whatever, then you would have a deference towards the black person because statistically speaking, it's likelier that they worked harder to get where they are, which is generally true. But that's not necessarily a racial bias thing. It's an attempt to correct for other imbalances with equality of opportunity, you know? It's not a perfect solution, but I don't think that it's like a vessel for racial animus, you know?
Well, I mean, that's basically how I feel about many of the conservative things that are castigated as being racist.
But the difference is affirmative action's goal is to reduce the total amount of racial inequality, but conservative policies tend to increase the total amount of racial inequality. So I think it's okay to infer from those policies. I mean, what else am I supposed to make of it when, like, say, for example, Donald Trump is calling Black Lives Matter protesters un-American, and that real Americans in the suburbs are going to be besieged by low-income housing being built? Like, these people are dog whistling out the ass, and this is from the President of the United States. I mean, his rhetoric is reflective of the entire conservative movement in this country. This isn't just like, these are, like, when you say our suburbs are under siege from Black Lives Matter, that's not a policy position. That's race war, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
I would say one of the main reasons that he castigates Black Lives Matter in the way that he does, and the many conservatives do, is because specifically the postmodern / Marxist, the value system just isn't in line with conservatism, which it's not really in line with many Western values to begin with. So that's why it's usually like castigated. At least from what I've seen,
Black Lives
that's
Matter
usually
isn't postmodern or Marxist or anything. It's the largest civil rights movement in the history of the country. Tens of millions of people participated in it.
Well, one of their leaders has come out and said they're a trained Marxist. So, I mean, even if that leader was lying or was disowned, I mean, he still came out and said it. So people are, you know, going to latch on to the information that
one
they
of the
have.
leaders of the Black Lives Matter organization, but the movement itself is tens of millions of people who these people don't listen. It's not leaders. There's no leader of the movement. Black Lives Matter protests don't need to hear from some central organization to go off. There have been thousands of these marches across the country. They aren't being coordinated. I don't think that the views of one person who's a member of the organization means that it's okay for the President of the United States to demonize tens of millions of people protesting in civil rights marches as anti-American, you know?
I mean, it depends on see, I don't mind, like, it depends on what the people are saying they explicitly believe, is what I would say there.
I imagine for the Black Lives Matter protesters, it's probably, you know, defund the police, or at least, you know, implement restrictions on their behavior, less racism in general. I mean, probably stuff like that, right? That's not anti-American, though.
That stuff, no, of course not. It isn't. I would say specifically, I think the main thing that when the president castigates them, he latches onto is the fact that that the one leader has come out as Marxist, and that would be anti-American. I didn't say that Donald Trump had a good reason for castigating the movement, but I'm saying I understand more or less his reasons for doing so.
Yeah, but then, the suburbs stuff and the Black Lives Matter attacking the suburbs, when, I mean, this is like race baiting. Well, it's race baiting is what it is. When he says suburbs, he means white. At one of the presidential debates, Biden called him out on this, said he was dog whistling like a foghorn, and Trump didn't even retort. At one point, he said that suburban women love me. What does that mean? He said something like 60% of suburban women love me, and he's going off a stat saying 60% of white women favor him. Like, when he says suburban, he means white. So when he's talking about Black Lives Matter threatening the white suburbs, this is identical to the rhetoric of like the white supremacists of the 1960s. Like, this is indefensible. This is infinitely more racist than the wildest dreams of critical race theory, you know?
Wouldn't you consider it racist to assume that he means white because he says suburb?
No, not when... See, this is what I mean about the willful ignorance to dog whistles. What else would he mean if he's talking about Black Lives Matter versus the suburbs? He doesn't retort when called out for dog whistling, and then he says that suburban women love him when he's referring to a stat about white women.
I don't remember him saying the suburban women loves him, but I do remember him saying that they're coming to the suburbs, and that obviously all of the violence, all of the mostly peaceful protests, I get it. Everything has been isolated in the cities right now. So when he says they're going to the suburbs, obviously he means literally they're going to go to the suburbs since it's only been happening in the cities. He's fear-mongering. I don't think he's dog whistling. He's getting the suburbs psyched up to vote for him because he knows he's not going to win the city. So he's fear-mongering to him.
The suburbs are historically considered white because of white flight. You had inner city areas that were racially integrated, but white people left near the turn of the century because there were increasing numbers of black people working in factories after the end of slavery. So suburbs have always, in this country, at least over the past century, historically been considered kind of like a bastion of whiteness. So for Donald Trump to fearmonger about a black rights movement moving into the suburbs, which are read as white, like coded white, and talk about low-income housing, and then he's used other terms to kind of suggest that he means white people when he says suburban. Like, this is what I mean by inferring. Like, to me, this isn't even like a reach or an inference or anything. This is just direct, obvious, blatant dog whistling, you know?
I mean, I understand that you believe that it's, direct dog whistling. It's...
Well, what would it take for you to believe? Like, this is not even coded language. Like, this is the most obvious possible expression of the sentiment. Black people are coming to rape your white women. Like, this is as close as you can get while being the president of the United States. So what would he need to do or say to make you think that's what he means?
Something actually racist where I wouldn't have to make a very far leap logically to connect the dots.
He just said suburban instead of white, and he's connected suburban and white before. So
do you not understand that some people are going to have a different opinion on that? Like,
it's not a matter of what everyone's going to have a different opinion on everything, but this is why we need to have like a common language when we infer stuff, because it's insane.
That I can definitely agree with.
But this is the problem that I have. Like, people, Tim Pool does this so much. He'll like reach to the moon to infer racism from left-leaning people trying to impose affirmative action. He's done shows and segments about how Western civilization is going to be destroyed by woke postmodernist Marxists because they wrote something on how whiteness is detrimental to civilized society. But then he'll look at Donald Trump literally talking about race war and he'll completely ignore it. He won't cover it. He won't talk about it. And when other people bring it up or expose the obvious language that he's using, like the obvious dog whistles, he'll downplay it. And I feel like a lot of his fans do that too. So the selective willingness to engage in inference is very, very strange to me.
It's because people have biases.
I agree.
That's easily explained too. Like, see, this is one of the main reasons that I wanted to talk to you, because I don't you seem to think that and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you seem to think that it would be better if we, and this is the nicest way I can think of framing it, got rid of the conservatives. I don't mean, I'm not trying to say you're saying violence or anything like that, but I've heard some of the other things that you said. I've listened to a few of your debates with conservatives on YouTube, and I don't want to be, rude and quote you from those debates, but you've said mean things about the conservatives, and you usually have a very harsh tone when you go into a conversation with them.
Yeah, I think conservatives are holding us back as a civilization, and the survival of our species kind of depends on them being made politically irrelevant. I don't mean that we need to purge them or anything. I just mean they need to shut up and let adults take control of the government for a little while. I guess they can have the reins back after we've stabilized things for a little bit. We just need some time,
See, what I think is you need conservatism to basically put a lasso, for lack of better words, on progressive ambition. So I think that I think they play. so the left doesn't push too far.
But like, what positive contributions are the Republicans making right now to our country?
Well, right now, I pretty much agree with Tim that they're just basically sitting around doing nothing. So, I mean, right now, aside from maybe a positive contribution would be holding back the excess of progressivism, but they're not even doing a good job of that.
Yeah, but like they're not just doing that, they're actively like dragging us down. They're deregulating like environmental regulate or they're deregulating environmental concerns. They're like defunding the EPA. They're handling the coronavirus terribly. We're doing the like one of the worst of any countries on the planet. They're actively trying to repeal civil rights. The Trump administration asked about taking away the right for gay couples to adopt, and the Supreme Court, the conservatives in the Supreme Court are talking about maybe removing gay marriage as like a legal right. Like they're not just sitting around, like they're actively making the country worse, you know?
Well, I mean, Democrats are also trying to repeal civil rights with Act 206 or whatever it was in California with their push for affirmative action. I mean,
Well, wait. So first of all, I'm not a big Democrat supporter, so I won't defend them. I
yeah,
still
I
think
know.
Republicans are worse. But also, the reason they were doing that is because they were trying to bring California's civil rights protections in line with other states in the country. So back when those civil rights protections were put in place in California, conservatives also complained about that. It's like a lose-lose. When California puts up additional civil rights protections, Republicans don't like it. But then when they take them away so they can impose affirmative action, Republicans complain that it's the beginning of the neo-postmodernist woke left reinstituting white slavery or something like that, you know? Like I don't think that's comparable.
Like I mean, our government goes through he said, she said pretty much all the time. Democrats do something, Republicans freak out. Republicans do something, Democrats freak out. It's
Sure, but I'm
always
talking
back
about
and
the
forth like that.
Republicans right now. Like they're literally just doing nothing but bad things, you know? Like
Well, I mean,
pretty
define
ubiquitously
bad.
negative. Well, the reduction of civil rights, climate change being pretty huge ones, COVID-19's handling being a pretty huge one, the incredible expansion of corporate power, I would define as bad because I'm a socialist. I think that most people in America, Tim also agrees, I think that corporate power has gone too far, so hopefully
Mhm.
like he would agree with that as
So
well.
you only see the Republicans doing these things, not Democrats.
No. Democrats do bad things as well, but the Democrats will also occasionally do good things. Republicans only do bad things. And the Democrats also have more room in them for legitimately good politicians to take, you know, prominence like Bernie Sanders. So I think they're a better vessel for genuine progressive change.
The I'm not entirely sure why or why you think the Republicans are only doing bad things now, but I mean, and that the Democrats have room for change, but the Republicans don't. I guess because
The
like
Republicans have
I
only
see.
gotten worse with time, though, haven't they? Like it's the Bush administration. Well, the Bush administration with foreign policy was unequivocally disastrous. But with in terms of its like domestic considerations, there was a much greater degree of bipartisanship from the Republican Party. Now the Republican Party isn't even in the same ballpark as the Democrat Party. And the more and more the party split continues, the less likely it is the Republicans are ever going to be able to do anything even remotely considered good, you know?
Not entirely.
But what
I
have
mean,
they done that's good?
I see them holding back or stop. Well, specifically, Republicans are going after big tech right now, more so than the Democrats. So I think that would
How
be
are they
at
going
least
after
one
big
check in
tech?
their favor. Well, they're making a show of going after big tech. Is that more fair?
Sure, but the only reason they are is because they keep getting banned off Twitter for being racist.
Well,
I don't know if that's like sticking it to corporate power that much. The Section 230 thing is like pathetic. Like
I wouldn't say they're being banned off Twitter for being racist. They're being banned off Twitter for disagreeing with progressives.
who's been banned off Twitter for disagreeing with progressives?
Who's that one lady who got banned for saying a woman is a woman, a man is a man? The feminist, the Megan something or other, Megan Murphy, I think maybe.
I'm pretty sure there was more context to that, but that's, I mean, the
I'm sure
context of that
I think
discussion
there
was
was like 3 or 4
transphobia.
tweets before that. I mean, that's another, that's your opinion coming off of it.
Well, sure, but it's also written in the TOS of Twitter. So,
Well, yeah, but I mean, I agree with you. Private companies have too much power right now. They shouldn't be able to expel somebody from discourse like that just for disagreeing.
wait, so do you think websites shouldn't be able to have terms of service?
No, of course they can, but I mean, very private websites or very large websites like Twitter that participate in the public discourse. I mean, it's I guess like I'm going to be a a little bit like Tim Pool on that issue, like a milquetoast fence sitter, because I could go either way. Like I see good with allowing Twitter to do whatever they want, or I see basically both sides of that argument. I mean,
Yeah, but like it's either you believe websites can have a TOS or you don't. I mean,
well, I mean, obviously that's it would be weird if websites can't have. I mean,
yeah. So if they can, then they have the right to include stuff like that, don't they? I mean, I'm
well,
I'm
yeah.
in opposition to corporate power, but let's be real. Corporate power isn't coming from Twitter TOS. Corporate power is coming from like government deregulation, from things like the Trump administration granting and from regulatory capture, him appointing former businessmen to high up roles, him appointing former CEOs of oil and gas companies to like the Department of Energy or climate change deniers to the EPA. Like this is where corporate power comes from. Corporate power doesn't come from like Twitter TOS, you know?
The I mean, half agree. The one thing I wanted to ask you too is why do you, well, actually, what do you consider a libertarian?
I don't know if I believe in right libertarianism. I mean, to me, a libertarian in the proper leftist context is a person who wants to maximize the degree of freedom an individual has.
Okay, well, this is something that I wanted to ask you about this too, because I consider myself a libertarian, like I told you in my first email to you, and I I personally, one of the reasons that I sided with conservatives on the cultural issues is because a lot of the stuff, the arguments you're throwing at me, I mean, they are well thought out, valid arguments, but I consider.
Just one quick thing.
Yeah.
I apologize for interrupting. So I was linked this from chat, but it seems Megan Murphy was banned not for saying men are men and women are women, but for targeted harassment of certain trans people on
Mhm.
Twitter, including like dead naming them and posting personal information about their previous identities. And they were warned several times by Twitter for their hate speech before finally being canned. So I don't think it was as simple as her not being PC. It was a pretty deliberate, targeted harassment campaign.
I'm this is actually something that's a very very good example too, because the like I might have said she was banned from Twitter. Maybe it was a warning that she got for that exchange. The men are men and women are women, and then eventually she got banned for other things too. Also, it would be possible for whoever wrote that article, I didn't see it myself, or the article just to misstate that it, like, to qualify what she did as targeted harassment, despite the fact that she was just stating her opinion. Because depending on
Stating an
how
opinion
you
can
view
be
the issue,
qualified harassment. I
well,
mean,
yeah,
what if
but
you quote tweeted black people over and over and over again and kept saying like, "Hey, blacks have on average a lower IQ. Hey, 1350, 1350." Like, even if what you're saying is technically derived from something you could argue is true, it doesn't mean it's not harassment, right?
well, yeah, but context matters a lot, doesn't it?
Sure, it does. Yeah, but it seems like she was engaging in a targeted harassment campaign of trans people, so it wasn't
Well,
just her
without
stating
looking
her
at any of the
opinion.
evidence, you're assuming as much as I am, aren't you?
No, because I'm looking at an article right now on the subject. I mean,
Article by who? And is it an op-ed? Because then
y-
it's like,
wait, you've only given your word and you left out a lot of context on what right are you criticizing the way in which this is being described by another?
I mean, if you would like to dig into it, we can. It's
Wait, what information source do you have that I don't have right now?
I went off the top of my head because I'm just trying to remember.
Oh, it's weird that you so do you have any evidence to contest the description that I've provided, or do you just feel like what I've said is incorrect?
Um, well, I mean, like I said, do you want to dig into it? Because we can just sit here and Google. I can Google something and then be like, "Here's my evidence," and then you can Google something and be like, "Here's my evidence." It's one of the main things that it's so hard to have discourse online with these sorts of things, because, like you said, you found an article. Well, if it's an op-ed, it like, what kind of information are you just getting a biased opinion, or are you actually able to see the tweets that she got
Well,
banned for, all of them,
all
in
opi-
context?
all opinions are biased. Of course, I'm not looking at every tweet right now. If down the line you want to provide me any information that you think exonerates her or her behavior, I'm happy to take a look at it. But I definitely don't want to like back and forth about this thing I don't care about right now.
Well, I don't care much about it either, but the point was that it's very very easy for you to get a different picture or idea of the same sort of evidence and facts that I do. And by that I mean you might be thinking, well, how can you get a different, like, facts are facts? How can you get a different,
It's funny that
you know?
it's funny you dislike postmodernism right now because you are expressing such a postmodernist opinion on the veracity of empirical evidence.
I don't think I said I dislike postmodernism, did I?
Oh,
I
I
mean,
mean, well, maybe that's the flaw in my perspective. I intuited it from you.
I'm honestly trying to remember if I said I disliked it or not. But I mean, yeah, I get what postmodernism is. It's to be basically critical analysis of almost everything. This is like, I can't tell you how many studies I've been linked by people that frame something so specifically to get the results that they want. And like here you go. The WHO released like an article for, and this is just off the top of my head too, I apologize. They released like an article a year or two ago that basically said, like, look how much the amount of deaths are going up due to global warming. And they don't give you any idea of what the amount of deaths were prior to global warming and what rate they were going up before global warming. And they take no effort to separate, like, you know, this is what the deaths would have been like. Like, let's say in 2020, there would have been 1,000 deaths from global warming. But now we can tell, since it's getting worse and we're not doing anything about it, there's 8,000. So that would tell you, you know, there's a 6,000 difference. So 6,000 people have died from global warming. But instead, the WHO just releases an article that says, like, hey, look, 8,000 people died. It must be from global warming. It's completely disingenuous, in my opinion.
I can't speak to the veracity of this article. I haven't heard of before. The only point that I'm making is that whatever the case may be, your characterization of her Twitter ban as she said women are women and men are men is not accurate. There was absolutely more to it than that. So that's the only point that I was trying to make. I didn't mean to get in a whole soliloquy about the empirical, you know, the trustworthiness of information. Whatever the case may be, there was something you were saying before I interrupted you to ask you about
that I've completely forgotten
Megan
about.
Murphy. Well, if have you lost it? Are we off that topic entirely?
If you remember what I was talking about, then yeah, because I was going somewhere with the veracity of evidence. Because I wanted to, like, as you consider yourself a libertarian, I wanted to, like,
that's right, libertarianism.
One of the main things I think we do wrong here, well, I should say the left does wrong, and why I've decided to side with the right culturally on many of the cultural issues is because most of the arguments you've brought forth, like even the Megan Murphy thing, framing matters a lot. Because when I said she was banned for, you know, calling men men and women women, she may have been banned for that. That may be factually true to state that, but she may have gotten unbanned and then banned again later for something else. So am I telling the factual truth, or am I wrong?
We're both framing things. There's no such thing as an objective perspective. I just feel as though by any metric, your assessment of the situation left out critical information that would prevent my audience from understanding the totality of her ban. Even if what I read came from a biased perspective, I think it's important to have that additional information, no?
I completely agree. But I'm still saying that it's really, really hard when sorry, I've completely botched my train of thought. So
that's fine. I do it all the
time. One of the reasons that I asked you about libertarianism is because I don't think it's okay. Like, it's very easy to get little things like this wrong, like us disagreeing about why Megan Murphy was banned off of Twitter. Because even looking at the full picture that you have in front of you and I don't, it would still be factually true for me to have said that she was banned for this reason. There may have been more to it, like she may have been unbanned later and then banned again, you know, et cetera, et cetera. There may be other context outside of it, such as that. But it wouldn't have been inherently wrong for me to have stated that she was banned from Twitter for that reason.
Well, I mean, you could lie by omission. I mean, by that you could say like, you could say like, if you wanted to, you could describe like the death of Frederick Hampton as like he died in his sleep, like, oh, he passed away in his sleep. Like, there, of course, you can frame anything in a certain way, and it's possible to say something that's technically accurate while still missing like the ultimate point of the issue. You know, like you could talk about, like, if you want to, like, here's the description of Germany in World War II. Okay, a proud nation revitalizing the public interest in its collective cultural history was invaded by a coalition of foreign nations, which destroyed systemically their infrastructure in their cities, demonizing them in propaganda, dehumanizing them in movies, bombing them out until their leader was finally forced to kill himself in an underground bunker as the remnant of their once great civilization was destroyed. That's a technically accurate description of Nazi Germany, but I feel like you're missing a couple of key points, you know? Like there's a few, yeah,
For sure, I would be.
yeah, you know?
The,
I feel like we're
the,
arguing postmodernism right now. Like I agree there are many narratives, but I just from my like here's my perspective at the end of the day. I want people to be good and happy. I want well-being to be maximized, and I think that in order to do that, we need to address systemic biases because those are one of the most like critical elements of human misery around. So in order to do stuff like that, we have to be skeptical when we analyze stuff like racism, sexism, transphobia, because doing so gives us the best possible vantage point from which to criticize these systems.
I basically agree. The one thing that I wanted to ask you is, you said before while you were talking that there are many different perspectives, and that, I mean, it's obvious that there are, but I'm wondering why you feel that the conservative, you probably feel that the conservative perspective is unreasonable or whatever you would call it, because you assume that their actions are motivated by racism. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, they lead to racism. I don't really care what they're motivated by, as long as they lead to racial inequality as an outcome. That's what bothers me. I don't really care if an individual is racist, like inside their head. What matters to me is what they do.
So, if that, like, do you agree that there are different perspectives on racial inequality too? I guess you could. It was sure. How I would frame it.
But I'd have to make that argument, right? And they would have to as well. And I've had a lot of conservatives on this stream, and I don't really get many good arguments defending conservative perspectives. It feels like the Trump administration and Republicans and just conservatism in general is just a nonstop cavalcade of objective failure. And I'm not even arguing in the same like reality as the people that disagree with me, you know? We have two completely separate. It's not that the narratives are different. It's that our understanding of reality is fundamentally fractured, you know?
Mm-hmm. I don't really disagree. I mean, they have a different value system than you do. They approach almost everything differently than you would do.
Well, they're also just wrong a lot. Like it's the alternative facts kind of thing, you know?
I would disagree a little bit there, because I think I've seen lefties wrong just as often as I've seen conservatives wrong. So it's the main thing that bothers me about when people take this the like a position to castigate the other side as racist is because basically, as we've gone over, you are inferring that they, are being racist based on the outcomes that whatever policies they do, end up as.
Well, I don't care if they're I can say like the things they do lead to racial inequality, yeah. But I can make these arguments. Like, I know lefties aren't wrong as often as conservatives because I'm a lefty. I make these arguments and I can defend them pretty well. But the conservative arguments, like right now, everything coming out of the Trump administration is like indefensible. It's insane. I don't think there's
many conservatives don't even like. Many conservatives don't even like the shit that Trump says, right?
He has like a 92% approval rating in the Republican Party. He has an unprecedented amount of support for his party.
And you assume that's because people like what he says?
I'm sorry. If you approve of Donald Trump, I think you're part of the problem. I mean, you can approve of him, vote for him, and then say, but he's mean on Twitter. I don't really think that matters. You voted for the guy. You approve of the guy.
I mean, I think the lesser of two evils makes a lot of sense in that situation, too. I think he's the lesser evil in comparison to Biden.
How?
Because, I mean, Biden is the establishment. I mean, you're a lefty.
They're both the establishment.
Trump has not been a part of the establishment.
What anti-establishment thing is Trump doing? He's expanded corporate and
giving
government
the middle finger to the war hawks.
How? He's increased drone striking. He's ramped up military engagement across the Middle East. He bombed Soleimani. He's actively pursued aggressive rhetoric against like militants in the Middle East. He's increased the propagation of ISIS by pulling out of Syria and then claiming he was going to pull them to defend the oil fields. Like, I don't. Yeah, like he nearly baited war with Iran. Like,
Well, he didn't cause war. He's one of the only
yeah,
presidents that hasn't caused war in his term.
that's a really low bar. You can't say he's not the
Indeed, it is.
establishment because he didn't start a new war, but he did
Well,
increase drone strikes and increase like military tensions. He's also
he
putting a
pulled
ton
more
of
of our
money
troops
into
out than previous presidents.
Huh?
He pulled more of our troops out than previous presidents, didn't he?
No, he's barely pulled any troops out over the course of his presidency. He keeps talking about it, but like he like pulls them out, but then he brings like mercenary forces in. Right now in Afghanistan, we have like 3 times as many mercenaries as we do like active soldiers because he pulls troops out, but then he just brings more people in. They're just not like enlisted soldiers, so so they cost more to the taxpayer, but if they die, nobody cares, you know?
Sorry, taking a drink.
No, it's okay. But he
Nah.
massively increased the military budget. Like, I don't know. Again, this is like a classic, like Tulsi Gabbard, Tim Pool thing. He's not anti-establishment. Like, in no way is he empowering the individual, you know?
I mean, I kind of disagree there about empowering the individual, but I would say he's, in comparison to the alternatives, he's anti-establishment.
How?
Like if you're looking at Trump and Biden, Trump is more anti-establishment.
It's such, I'm like really sorry. It's just such a low IQ way of analyzing like presidential candidates. Like who's more anti-establishment? Why don't we talk about policy and like what they believe in and what they do? Establishment, what does it mean to be anti or pro-establishment? What if a person is anti-establishment because they're like a horrible piece of shit? Like what if like Genghis Khan or like Attila the Hun like became president? Like that guy would probably be anti-establishment. They don't even speak English, but does that mean they'd be like a better leader? Like,
well, here's like something that I would bring up. You consider yourself a lefty, which means you recognize the evil our government has done, right? Like we've fucking overturned God knows how many elections outside of our country, and we've meddled in however many other countries' affairs.
Yeah, like what Trump did with Guaido in Venezuela before the administration declared it failure. Huh?
To bring up something Trump has done to when I'm talking about the establishment at large. I don't care what Trump has done in his 4 term right here. I'm talking about the establishment as a whole. Like we can objectively say that the American, whatever you would want to call it, establishment, or basically the government that has been running us for God knows how long, that has been fucking in every other country's affairs for however long.
Yeah, of course.
So Trump has not been a part of that until 4 years ago at this point. Biden has been a part of that for like 40 years.
But how is that an indictment of their quality? Like, wouldn't that mean that any president would be better just if they don't have any experience in the government? Like, that doesn't make a person a better president just because they went in there with no experience.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying it makes him a better president. I'm saying why Trump is more anti-establishment than Biden.
What does establishment mean? Like, it's just a meaningless buzzword that doesn't correspond to any actual policy?
No, it doesn't correspond to any actual policy.
What's the point?
Because you brought up that Trump was not anti-establishment, and I'm telling you why he is.
Then why are we arguing over whether or not he adheres to a characteristic that bears no meaning with regards to the quality of his presidency? When I think of anti-establishment, I think of somebody like Bernie Sanders. Why? Well, Bernie Sanders has been in government for decades, so he's not anti-establishment because he just wandered in after being a New York billionaire his entire life. He's anti-establishment because he actively fights against the systems of power that he is a part of. Trump doesn't. Bernie Sanders doesn't want to increase the degree to which corporations control your life. He wants to decrease it. He wants to give the average person more money, more power, more education. That's anti-establishment. What has Trump done? Trump has appointed that, what's her name? The Davos, that bitch, to the Department of Education. He wants to privatize our education, give people less equality of opportunity when it comes to their education. He's massively cut taxes for the rich, deficit spending, which we're going to have to pay down for decades down the line. He's given more money and power to the military establishment. He constantly praises other despots around the world, other people like Putin or Bolsonaro who have comparable positions of power over their government. Like, this guy is an anti-establishment in a way that means anything to me.
Well, see, that's a perspective issue, not so much a.
No, can
Like,
we talk about like real policy or things that actually affect human life? Because you
well,
just admitted your definition
I was
of
going somewhere with pointing out that Trump was anti-establishment in comparison to Biden. Like,
okay,
I'm
but
explaining to you why people like Tim, people like me, are more so siding with Trump than
but
Biden.
you already acknowledged that your definition of establishment doesn't bear any meaning to his actual policies or like competence as a president. So what relevance is that term then?
Well, if you let me explain a little bit more,
Yeah, okay.
the main reason that the main reason that I think people like Tim Pool did not vote for Biden over Trump is because Biden basically represents, like you admitted earlier, our government has done absolutely horrible things. Biden has been involved in many of those horrible things for the last 40 years. Trump has not. Trump has just gotten in there. And yes, I
He's
will
done
agree
tons
with
of
you that he's
terrible stuff over the past 40 years.
Trump. Yeah, but he hasn't been a part of our establishment government for the last 40 years.
This is just an argument against like like having experience in the government though. Like
It's an
would you
argument. It's an argument against
wait,
what is establishment and what isn't.
is Trump more or less anti-establishment than Bernie Sanders?
Well, we have different opinions on Bernie too.
No, okay, so
Like,
do you think wait, so do you think he's more or less than an independent who ran against the party that he entered and fought against every institutional center of power in this country, a person who's been protesting foreign wars since before you and I were born, a person who was supporting trans rights back in the 1980s, who was fighting for gay representation in the military back in the 1990s, a person who was fought consistently with democratic establishments and ended up becoming one of the front runners in the 2016 and 2020 elections in spite of never kowtowing to the policy expectations of his masters in the DNC. Do you think this person, Bernie Sanders, is less anti-establishment than Donald Trump?
well, he has cowtailed.
May.
That's definitely.
Yes or no?
Do I think Bernie Sanders? Give me a moment to think, please. I don't know a lot of Bernie's history, but based on what I know of him, like now, I would say that I'm leaning more towards no, but I would say he's about on par with Trump is what I would put him at.
Okay, then I think your definition of establishment or anti-establishment is foolish and is utterly irrelevant when we talk about the worth of a political candidate. Like, it means nothing. It's like we might as well be arguing about their horoscopes as far as I'm concerned. Why don't we talk about policy? Like, what is this? More anti-establishment? What?
No, I mean,
means
I
nothing?
was going somewhere with it before we got off on a tangent.
Well, but if the
Like,
term you're using doesn't have any meaning, then I don't know why
to
we're
you,
using
it doesn't.
You've yes, to me it doesn't. So, do you have any like policy positions you agree with Trump more than Biden? If you're actually choosing your presidential candidate based on a term you admit doesn't bear any meaning to their like positions or policy, then that is incredibly foolish. Would you prefer Kanye West? Because Kanye West ran in 2020. He has no government experience. Trump has 4 years of government experience. Maybe Kanye is more anti-establishment than Donald Trump. Like, and then in
Probably
2028, we have to find a bank, like a bank manager who's never run for anything and who only speaks Sudanese. We can pick like I don't know. Like, where are we going with this?
We're going to where essentially the people who voted for Trump voted for a more anti-establishment candidate than the people who voted for Biden. The people who voted for Biden essentially voted for the establishment.
It's like the people who voted for Trump voted for him because he was a Sagittarius and they wanted a Sagittarius instead of an Aquarius. That's what you're saying to me right now. These terms mean nothing. Like, mean nothing. You're literally like, your term of anti-establishment is literally just means how long they've been in government. Like,
how much they've been involved in all of the evil shit our government has done.
how long they've been in government.
Yes.
Okay,
so
that's it. So that's your only qualifying characteristic for being the president.
No, that is a mischaracterization and a straw man of what I'm trying.
Policy
this is
preferences
1 point.
do you have for Donald Trump over Joe Biden? Because your definition of anti-establishment here is nonsensical. I don't know what it means.
Well, it's definitely not nonsensical.
All it means is that they've been in government longer. What if a person's been in government longer, but they have better policies? Also, Trump was part of another establishment. He was a real estate mogul. He famously never paid his contractors. He's been involved in numerous lawsuits about discrimination in housing policy, not to mention the dozens of rape accusations that have been thrown his way, some of which were credible enough to even go to court. Like, there are other establishments that he's a part of. The government isn't the only evil establishment in this country.
I
Corporate
was
power is one of the biggest ones around. Like, and Trump bankrolled Democrats before he switched over to the Republican Party. He donated to the Clinton campaign. Even before he was a politician himself, he was using his dirty silver spoon money to fund the Clinton war machine. Like, you think his hands are clean? He was a friend of Epstein. What
his hands definitely aren't clean.
Yeah, okay, like, what policy, like, when
See,
I vote for a president, the only thing I care about is the outcomes of their presidency, and that's usually done through policy and attitude. So, what do we have?
Typically when I vote for somebody, I try to do it so based on moral character. So obviously Trump was a not good for moral character as far as almost any metric goes.
I would agree with that.
But I like this was the most heated discussion I've seen that you had with Tim on his podcast, is because you were pushing back on him for being anti-establishment, and he got really upset with you because you're like, why do you keep defending Trump? I don't understand. And Tim was basically playing whataboutism, and he got really, really fucking mad with you.
Well, I just don't think either of you are anti-establishment. You're defending the establishment, like, to me right now, but you're...
I mean, so are you when you're voting for Biden and defending Biden.
No, because I can argue why a Biden vote empowers disenfranchised people more than a vote for Trump. I can absolutely defend that position empirically. I even have studies to defend that. But when we're deferring back to this nebulous concept of establishment, like, then that's the only metric of value, and your definition of establishment means that a person who fought against corporate and government power for 40 years is less anti-establishment than a multi-billionaire real estate mogul who's involved in every DNC higher up before finally running for the Republican Party in 2016. If that's your definition of anti-establishment, then that's insane to me. Like, that's a meaningless definition to me. So I just want to talk about policy. How would Trump make the country better than Joe Biden?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't have many policy arguments. Do
you think it's do you understand how it's frustrating for me when people will ardently defend Donald Trump or attack Joe Biden, but they have, with all due respect, no fucking idea what the actual outcomes of these presidencies are? I'd be willing to bet that if we got into the weeds, you don't know what policy positions Trump advocated for in 2016, what he's doing now, what he's planning to do, or what Joe Biden wants to do. And you're defending them based on this is the Tim Pool brain stuff. I should have gone harder on him about this. This is what he does. Tim Pool's entire channel is like a conservative propaganda outlet. And when he's challenged on it, he recognizes it's impossible for him to defend Trump empirically. So he'll defend it like a culture warrior. It's not, oh, Trump will do better policies. It's, yeah, Trump's an idiot, but at least he's holding back the far left. He's not a critical race theorist, and he's anti-establishment. But none of these things mean anything. They're meaningless terms. And meanwhile, Trump continues to deregulate corporations. He continues to put more and more money into the military-industrial complex. He continues to do more and more mishandling of the COVID crisis and destroy our relationships abroad. And like, what am I supposed to say to this? We're not even arguing. This is what I mean about not living in the same reality. We're not even arguing over the same things.
I mean, yeah, it's very easy to push the conversation in any sort of direction to something that you are more knowledgeable about. I was explaining why I thought he was more anti-establishment than Biden, and we got off on a tangent, and you directed the conversation over in this way, which is an area that I'm admitting to you I am less knowledgeable about. So I'm trying to be honest with you as far as that goes. And what I would say, I mean, I don't disagree with you that, you know, this is the Tim Pool shit that, you know, you did push back on him about this, and I admitted to you basically won that argument, or basically the whole night. You were on top and he was on the bottom. He didn't have very good, really anything to counteract any of your points. And
it was a mutual exchange of ideas. I know not everybody is consequentially minded, and that's fine. That's legitimate. If some people are more deontological or whatever, or virtue ethics, but I understand not everybody comes at this from the same set of perspectives. But I don't know how we can. Should the goal not be to improve this country? Like, is that not what we're working towards? It is,
but we have different ideas on what improve means, and we have different ideas on what the problem, or different perspectives on what the problems are.
But do you think your metric might be a little fucked?
I mean, you don't know what my metric is. You only know that I've flubbed the establishment and anti-establishment thing, or that we have a disagreement on it, however you would want to describe it.
But you said that
The,
your metric is how establishment a candidate is, and
no,
that's
that's not my only metric.
well, what other metrics are there? Because some of these metrics have to be rooted in like policy or what like the outcomes of their presidency are going to be, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, my other metrics are, I'm concerned about some policy issues. I'm more concerned though. Well, I wouldn't say more concerned, but my main involvement for getting involved in all of this shit was due to the culture war aspects of it. So, like, obviously, I'm going to be out of my water if we start talking about policy issues because I got into everything, this whole political, shenanigans years ago, specifically for the cultural things.
There is
Because
no culture war.
there definitely is, though.
No, it's not. It's a lie people like Tim Pool push because they know they can't defend policies. Right
So
now,
you
Stephen,
don't think
right
that people
now,
are losing their jobs because of the quote unquote
a
cultural war?
couple of people are losing their jobs for PR reasons, which has been happening for as long as jobs have existed. Right now, Steven Crowder is holding a 100,000-person live stream on the left destroying Christmas. That's your future. A future where you don't care about policy, where you don't know what you believe in or who you're advocating for, but where you're perpetually terrified that some nebulous understanding of what the left is going to take away everything you love and care about.
I would not entirely agree there. If once we actually can argue about policy, like once we get past the culture war part to the part where we can actually argue about policy, I'm not talking about in this discussion with you. I'm talking about in general because I don't think there is any getting past. Like there's no point in even talking about policy until one side stops castigating the other as racist, which is the main reason that I emailed you because
the left talks about policy. You realize that all Trump has done in the past 4 years is culture war bait. Whereas when Biden gets up on stage
absolutely.
and he talks about like his presidency, he only ever talks about policy. And this is Joe Biden, not even a leftist. This is just a milquetoast liberal, unironically decking the entire GOP establishment by getting up there and talking about what he's actually going to do as presidency. All Trump goes up there and does is he puffs his chest up and talks about how the suburbs are going to get invaded. Like you guys are the ones pushing the culture war.
Well, I would say the people on the right are the ones that got from my perspective, at least where I came into this culture war is where the left basically during midway through Obama's term is they started castigating the other side as racist.
The conservatives have always been racist. It's not, they just started saying it louder because it's correct.
I think
that's not culture war though. Like they're just racist. Like I don't know. Yeah,
I disagree, and I think that I think it's a major problem that people who are falsely assuming the other side's motives think they have the right to shove what they believe down the other person's throat.
This is a lot of really loaded language. Nobody's shoving anything anybody believes down anyone else's throat. We all have free speech. We all have a right to say whatever we want. Okay. You have as much a right to speak as I do. Admittedly, I have a larger platform, but we all have that same right. So this isn't about shoving anything down anyone's throat. Additionally, of course the Republican Party's racist. I would have to brush up on stuff to go back to the Bush years to try to remember all the fucked up stuff that he did and all the fucked up stuff that Cheney did with regards to race relations. Like, because I wasn't politically active back then. But like, yeah, like this, of course, yeah. We're only 2 generations removed from white people frothing at the mouth, throwing rocks at little black girls being integrated into schools. There are people at those protests who are still alive today, and they vote for Trump. The Ku Klux Klan has endorsed Trump. Every racist militia in this country has endorsed Trump. There's a reason for that.
Richard Spencer actually endorsed Biden.
Richard Spencer, you mean the one guy, not any organization behind him, who's irrelevant now and was universally made fun of?
It's kind of interesting that everything you brought up was relevant, but the one I brought up wasn't.
Because I'm bringing up the plurality of evidence, and you're bringing up one example. And the reason he supported Biden, by the way, was because he thought Trump was so incompetent that he would destroy white countries better than any Democrat could.
Out of curiosity, do you see that as a different of perspectives too, that you're more focused on the collective and I brought up the individual?
Are you seriously arguing that bringing up one individual is more relevant than bringing up...
Nope. I'm just saying can you see that is a different perspective? Like I brought up an individual.
Wait. There are always different perspectives. What matters is the validity of the perspective. Do you believe one individual anecdote is is more meaningful than the plurality of
No,
evidence?
but I don't believe that the shit you brought up bears it. I don't believe that like you can say like, well, racists support him, so he's racist.
Well,
I think
it
that's
does
just a
tell you
stupid argument
something,
to begin
doesn't
with.
it? And it does tell you something that all of the governors and all of the local
Well,
legislators who were anti-black integration back in the 1960s ended up supporting conservative or Republican policies the further on they went. Many of them switched parties as well. And it is pretty interesting that all of the same zip codes that ended up polling hardest against the civil rights movement way back 50 years ago all end up vote heavily for Trump today. And it's a weird coincidence that all of our perspectives right now on racial relations concerning Black Lives Matter fit into very specific demographic and political codes that have been preserved uninterrupted since the 1960s, up to and including the same political candidates and the same political strategizers who've been working since the Southern strategy. Racism is not this nebulous, ethereal, one in a million thing. It's a very real fact of life that a lot of people just fucking hate black people. It's always been the case in this country. We can fix it, but we have to acknowledge this exists.
see, like you brought up the since you said it, the thing about the supporters somewhat matters. The fact that more racists are supporting Trump than Biden. This is just a personal anecdote, completely admitting it's an anecdote. I've watched a lot of Tim Pool's live streams, chat as they go by. I've also done the same for Crowder and Shapiro, the videos that they upload on YouTube. And I've never seen the words, I mean, these are racially loaded languages that I've seen in your stream specifically and not in theirs. Coon, House Negro, and Uncle Tom. I've never seen either of any of those words used in their streams, only in yours. So,
Wait.
and I don't think that's a valid argument to even use against you. I think it's a completely idiotic argument to use against you.
And why are you using it?
Also, because
those
you
terms,
just used the same argument against me.
That is not the argument I just used against you.
Yes, it is. It is the same argument.
No,
you said that
these
racists support Trump, therefore he's more likely to be racist than Biden.
Does that have? Wait, what does the general tendency for conservatives to be racist have to do with the comments under my live streams? Also, the terms you just described
because
are usually
obviously people are coming to your stream that are racist.
Please. The terms you just described are usually terms black people throw at other black people they think are sucking up the whites.
To an extent,
so that's not a term conservatives would use. Why would conservatives ever use? Yeah, generally speaking. So why would conservatives ever use those terms? They would be criticizing the tokens they rely on to not look racist, like Candace Owens.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but it's why I just think it's a dumb argument to make because I've seen racially loaded language in your live stream.
You realize what you're doing right now, in addition to this not even being the same argument, you're doing a whataboutism. You're doing another thing Tim Pool does,
positive, yes.
Where you jump from point to point when you're uncomfortable with the one we just abandoned. So what I was talking about...
We can go back to that one.
Okay, so if we look at... there are so many metrics that you can use to determine the racial animus, which tends to be supported by the Republican Party. So I don't think calling them racist is like culture war. You would say that 60 years ago. I can imagine you like a proto Tim Pool fan in a black and white photo at a civil rights protest in Little Rock, and you're like these culture warriors forcing integration. Like, it's not about the culture war. It's, are you racist or do you support anti-racism? Like, are you racist? I'm asking you.
Am I?
Yeah.
See, I would say that this isn't something you can say about yourself. It's something that has to be said about you. And
sure.
I would say the same for being a good person.
Do you think you're
like,
racist?
Do I?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, then what's the issue?
What do you mean?
Well, then what's the issue with racists being called racists?
Nothing, if they're actually provable to be racist.
What do you mean by provable?
Good evidence that... I mean, I basically agree with everything you said about you have to infer their actions. I know, obviously, somebody's not going to like come out and be like, yo, I'm a racist. It's just not going to happen. That's
what if they support policies that hurt black people?
See, this is subjective. It's too subjective to actually like.
All assessments of people's characters are subjective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To an extent, some of them are more. You can get empirical with it if you actually. Use psychology and took your time, but more often than not, yes, they're subjective.
So what if there's a political party that for the past 60 years has persistently taken issues or positions on issues that disproportionately hurt black people?
And what if that political party's whole ideology was based on conservation?
Then I would say they're conserving racism.
It depends on exactly what policies we're talking about, and this is where another reason that it is subjective, because you
Wait,
can look
the
at the
argument
very,
that it's
very same
subjective
thing.
isn't an argument. All of this is subjective. We're making arguments right now.
I'm
Trying to prove our
aware.
points. Yeah. So you say it's because it's conservation. That's irrelevant to me. If you're supporting racist policies, it doesn't matter if it's for conservation or not.
Okay, and I would say your opinion that the policy is racist is irrelevant to me.
Wait, I'm not saying about my opinion. I'm asking you, what if one political party consistently supports positions which hurt the black community?
Then I would probably agree that that's racist. You would have to prove to me how the Republicans do it, though.
Okay.
More so than the Democrats, even.
What about the war on drugs?
And
what about going hard on crime? What about the expansion of the prison industrial
see,
complex? What
the
about
war
private
on drugs?
prisons?
Why does that like? How is it the policymakers' fault that hurts one group over another?
Because it was literally implemented because the government wanted to crack down on minority activism and hippies back in the 1960s. And while you can't make it illegal to be black, you can make it illegal to smoke pot, which a lot of them were doing. Nixon's aides admitted this. It was racial bias from the get-go.
Well, I'm not going to defend, Nixon's administration.
Yeah, so I mean, okay, so the drug wars continued to be supported to varying degrees up to this point. The Democrats are mostly in favor of drug decriminalization, at least to a greater extent than the Republican Party. So that would be an element where they're trying to undo racial animus. What about the crack versus cocaine epidemic? What about the fact that Republicans were especially fastidious in trying to legally delineate between crack and cocaine, which led to a massive series of crackdowns in the inner city, which led to an expansion of the prison system, leading to literally hundreds of thousands to millions of black men being arrested for crimes that they would have been charged less for if they had been white and privileged? Like, that's pretty racially biased, Or voter disenfranchisement, where black people consistently get purged off voter rolls, or majority black districts in Republican areas tend to have legislation passed where it's harder for them to get registered to vote, or they attempt to pass voter ID laws. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to like gish gallop you, because that is what I'm doing right here. The issue is that the argument that the Republican Party is racist is such an incredibly well substantiated one. But I get frustrated because anytime we have this conversation, I feel like I have to dig up a textbook, and it's like, okay, here we go. And then we have to roll through all of it. But I feel like, honestly, you don't really care. That at the end of this conversation, you're going to go right back to saying Donald Trump is the anti-establishment candidate and the culture war reigns on because the crazy lefties won't stop calling people racist. So it feels like it's almost a wasted effort,
Well, don't you think that's kind of disingenuous to assume how I'm going to judge our conversation?
I've had a lot
you could
of
be educating me right now.
Well, it's not, well, sorry. I don't mean to be like super cynical or anything like that. I distrust people who are concerned with the culture war over like policy, I guess. I've had a lot of bad experiences with people like that.
Well, I mean, I can understand that. It's funny that almost all of the Marxists I talk to, they always want to direct the conversation to policy instead of culture war. It's I like just a personal anecdote that I've discovered from discussing this stuff with many Marxists. It's a common theme for whatever reason.
Yeah, most real people you talk to in the real world will also try to direct your attention away from the invisible friend you have floating beside your left shoulder.
Well, I think the main reason is because I mean, arguably the Democrats usually do like I told you in the email. I agree with you probably on 90% of the things you can put forth. Like, I'm not in favor of the Republicans wanting to ban pot or them voting like whatever bill they just did in the Senate, where basically Republicans, as expected, almost all voted no to decriminalizing pot.
Yeah.
Like, I'm completely in favor of that. I think it's a completely idiotic position for them to hold, but I understand that their ideology is based on conservatism. So I don't hold that against them for voting against it. I think it's necessary to have people who put up those sort of stop guards to stop people like
why do we need people
from going too far?
Why do we need people to stop us from making the world a better place?
See, do you think the left can go too far?
Of course the left can go too far. That's what we have the Democratic Party around for, to keep us in check. Trust me, the Democrats are not exactly going to throw this party into socialism the nanosecond the Republicans are out of the ring. So we already have a checking mechanism, and I'll get rid of that one too. Give me some time. But the Republican Party, how can you're like, You're saying it's a good thing for them to do bad things because when they
I'm not
do
saying
bad things, they're
I'm
preventing.
not saying it's a good thing when they do bad things. I'm saying I understand the conservation aspect of their ideology, and I think that makes a better explanation than blanket racism.
Well, the marijuana thing's probably not super racist. Nowadays, I
Well,
imagine
yeah.
their ban against the marijuana thing is mostly just because they're pieces of shit who like seeing people suffer. Where's this like conservation defense coming from? Do you think that's like a good justification for behavior? Like rape is okay. We've been doing it for millennia. Like,
No, I mean that's a bit of a straw man too. I'm saying like I understand an aspect of their ideology is to conserve. That's why they're called conservatives. So
how is that virtuous in and of itself?
I'm not saying that it is. That's your assumption.
So
I'm saying
are you fine
I
with them
think this is
banning the
a
weed?
better logical explanation of their behavior than they are racist.
Oh, well, but so first of all, traditionalism and racism go hand in hand, like all around the world for fairly obvious reasons. But second of all, if your traditionalism leads to racism, you're a racist. I don't know I don't understand this distinction. What if like you met a Republican senator and they were in the middle of raping a 12-year-old boy and they were like, "Oh yeah, I'm a conservative. I'm conserving ancient Greek gender relations." And then you're like, "Oh, that's not a pedophile. That's a traditionalist conserving ancient Greek traditions." Like, okay. And then like the police walk in and you're like, dude. He's not a pedophile. He's a Greek traditional. Like, I don't understand. If you're
Do you know what reductio ad absurdum is?
What I've just described is literally analogous to what you've described.
Yep.
It's not absurd. It's exactly as absurd as what you said. I've reflected your absurdity. You're looking at a mirror right now.
Well, I'm saying that is, I mean, that is an argument to absurdity. I get it. Like, obviously, nobody is going to be like, obviously, to say that or conservatives conserve doesn't mean that I would be suddenly okay with them raping a 12-year-old girl.
But you're okay with them doing racist things.
No, I'm disagreeing with you that they do racist things. I think your inference of their behavior, you assume racism, that like they're doing this because they hate brown people, and I think they're doing this because they want to conserve.
It doesn't make a difference to me. Okay, so what if a person didn't want to integrate the schools racially because he was a traditionalist? Would you say that's
another
racist?
Reductio to
No. I'm asking you a question. Would you say that's racist?
Ask the question again. I'm sorry, I interrupted you and my mind went blank.
Okay, would you say it is racist if a conservative did not want to racially integrate schools because they wanted to conserve traditional racial relations?
Yes, it would be racist.
Why?
I mean, that one's kind of a bit obvious, isn't it?
Wait, how? I thought they're just conserving traditional racial relations.
This is why I said you went reductio ad absurdum. I mean, obviously, if you're going to be like, here's the most absurd thing I can think of to why you're wrong.
It's not absurd. You're literally saying that you think their tendency to conserve better explains their behavior than racism. I'm telling you there's no difference.
In that example, yes.
But okay, so what about I'm trying to think, because Tim Pool fans have such a like weak barometer for what systemic racism is these days. Okay, what if there was a Republican politician who tried to implement a voter ID law that was specifically targeting people of color? He was specifically targeting certain types of voter identification in certain districts to maximize the number of black people who'd be inconvenienced by it. What would you, and they're saying, oh, I'm just trying to conserve old traditions of preserving the vote. Like, do you think that would be racist?
I would say factually prove it, and then I would be more...
Prove what?
More on your side of saying yes. Because a lot of these arguments that you make where, they have these policies that you can point to specific racial outcomes like disparities or whatever argument you would like to make in that regard. There are different ways, or rather, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. They're like...
What do you want me to prove?
I would have, like... You would have to prove that what you said is factually true beyond all reasonable doubt, and it's not
what part? Like the fact that it hurts black people?
You would need to. I mean, you would need to prove all of it if you're the one making the claim, wouldn't you?
But what's all of it? Like, what tenets would I have to prove?
You would have to prove that it disproportionately hurts minorities more so than whites.
Okay.
Let me think. It's funny how your brain never works when you're on the spot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's yeah, no hate or anything. The reason I bring this up is because what I described to you happened. In North Carolina, state legislators attempted to push voter ID laws, which specifically targeted the types of IDs that black people use, disallowed them, specifically disallowed certain types of registration that black people use disproportionately.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you give me something to Google to like? I want to like
North Carolina voter ID law. The Supreme Court of the state said that the legislators targeted black people with surgical precision, and they struck it down. In fact, those legislators had actually looked up what types of identification black people used. So what they did was, what they thought in their head was, we don't want black people to vote at all. But we can't just keep them from voting. We can't disallow them from voting. So instead, we're going to do everything in our legal power to specifically preclude black people from voting. And even the courts agreed unanimously that this was a racist law, even though nothing about the law said anything about black people. Do you believe something like that could be racist?
I would need to, like, I can't just say in this moment without seeing, you know, any of the evidence or anything like that.
What about
the
hypothetical that I've provided you, given everything that I said is true? Because it is. You can look it up, everything that I said.
If I extend you then, I mean, obviously, yes, but we're obviously going to contest almost everything that you brought up, which is the problem with the culture war, correct?
Like, well, sure, but in this specific case, I mean, even the courts agreed. Surely the Supreme Court of the state agreeing that it was racially charged is pretty heavy evidence in my favor. You
would surely agree, too, that one specific case wouldn't taint the entire collective.
I'm only talking about this case and asking you if you think that it's racist.
If everything you said is true, then I would probably assume that that one person would be, yes. The people
the state legislators and everyone who voted on it.
The thing here, though, is one of the things you said where people were specifically targeting blacks. That was one of the things that you said that was an assumption. You said they specifically, quote unquote, with laser precision, they targeted blacks or something like that.
Yes, that was the quote from the Supreme Court of the state.
That is a very subjective claim to make to me.
Mate,
I haven't looked at any of the other evidence, but...
Okay. This is the issue. When we talk about systemic racism today, obviously politicians aren't going to write into law, fuck black people. Like, this is one of the most obvious indicators of racial bias. And, like, if we can't tune our barometers to look for something like this, we can't fight racism at all.
Here's the thing. If I looked over everything and I agreed with you, then we would have absolutely no problem. The problem that I have is when people bring up examples like this, and then I eventually go through them and look over everything, and I start popping holes in that person's theory, then I get really pissed off, because then essentially you are assuming the other person's motives. And due to that, you think it's okay for you to shove your ideology down their throat. That's the big problem.
What is this language? First of all, I don't care about their motives. I only care about the outcome. And second of all, what do you mean shoving ideology down people's throat? Why do people like you always use language like that? We're just talking.
Well, I'm specifically like thinking of previous things that you said, like walling off Alabama is one of the...
Okay, I'm pretty sure it should be known I don't actually want to wall off Alabama.
Yes,
yeah, right. It. Okay, but like, what is, like, you say, like, shoving people or shoving my beliefs down people's throats. I just don't know what you mean by that. Like, I'm making an argument.
You claim to be a libertarian, which means
I'm a libertarian.
You would have a problem infringing on other people's freedom. So,
yeah, racism is a huge infringement on people's freedom. It's one of the biggest ones we have.
Yes, I don't disagree. But if you are wrong, then you are shoving your beliefs down somebody else's throat. Or
Aren't I,
actually,
even if I'm
let me
right?
ask you. Yes.
Yes.
But then morality would be on your side, I would argue.
Well, then
if you are right, then yes.
Then the phrase "shoving it down your throat" is nothing more than an unnecessary homoerotic charge. It doesn't actually delineate.
I was going to ask you what language you would like me to use instead of that.
Well, I'm just making arguments.
Well, I mean, what would you describe it as if you forced other people to live their life the way you want them to live their life?
That's really vague. I don't want people raping. Is that
okay?
Imposing on their freedom?
That's fair. I mean,
okay.
Technically, yes, it would be imposing on their freedom, but I don't care that it is imposing on their freedom since it's morally wrong to rape people.
But it brings about freedom in another way, because if I make it illegal to rape, now people will live less in fear of rape, no? So I've given freedom to other people. Same with murder.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
So in what ways do I want to force people to live life in X way? I want to maximize people's individual liberties. But to me, that involves protections from certain types of discrimination. And one of those types of discrimination is racism. I think that enhances human freedom.
I would say specifically, well, as far as race goes, I know you're against the corporate shenanigans where they basically sit people down in the meetings where you basically have to like sit through a seminar of why everybody's racist and you're racist, blah blah blah. You dislike that stuff too, correct?
They don't seem to be very effective. If they were effective, I guess I could hear an argument for them. But yeah, racial equality seminars don't seem to lead to positive.
I would concur with you there. I would consider that, though, as a way of shoving beliefs down somebody else's throat.
Isn't it the right of a corporation to train their employees?
Correct. It depends on how far they go with it. Are we going to codify certain things like that into law? Because then that's a different story. Like, I'm not contesting, like, I'm not saying the corporation shouldn't be able to do that. I understand, you know, they are allowed to do that under the law. And even if...
But nowhere in law is there a requirement that corporations give their employees critical race theory. Yeah, but who's advocating for that?
Well, if you think half the country is racist or the Republicans are racist,
I think
what would you do to...
is racist. I don't like Democrats either, to be fair.
I mean, see, it's kind of funny because I was going to one of the main shower arguments when you're thinking about arguing with the person. I was going to tell you that like I could agree that like if you think both Republicans and Democrats push white supremacy, I am more agreeable to that point than only the Republicans push it.
Well, they do it way worse, but yeah, I would say they're not even close to equally. At least libs tend to be on the side of Black Lives Matter. Donald Trump is saying they're like anti-American thugs. Like he's way farther away, you know?
I see much of what the liberals do as far as like they pander to the minority groups. I see that as basically just pandering and virtue signaling. I strongly have a problem assuming that they are sincere with the things they believe.
Insincere pandering is quite a bit preferable to the President of the United States demonizing a racial civil rights movement. But
assuming that, well, yes, I would agree there if you draw those two side-by-side comparisons.
I think that's a perfectly legitimate side-by-side comparison to draw. But like, what do you mean by virtue signaling? Again, I'm trying to talk about like policy and stuff. Do you mean like corporations? Corporations only have those racial equality seminars because they're trying to reduce their liability in the case of a lawsuit. But they've been doing that for centuries. Like, that's not new or anything. They used to do sexual harassment seminars, and now they don't do those as often because most people now grow up knowing you can't slap the ass of your secretary. Not everyone, but most people. 50 years ago, that was not the case. Sexual harassment was way more common in the workplace. Now we have the Me Too movement. We're improving on it even further. And all these seminars are really just a way for them to avoid corporate liability. But these aren't being like orchestrated by some woke cult or anything like that, you know? Usually what happens is a corporation thinks, Black Lives Matter's happening and people are really concerned about the blacks and their equality? Let's get on this. And they go to the marketplace and they find some recent sociology graduate with an MA who claims they'll be able to give them a seminar. They write up a PowerPoint, get paid $4,000 to deliver a 3-week seminar across 8 locations. And then like they walk away, nothing gets changed. The corporation spends a little bit of money. They pocket the cash. And then, and here's the critical part, people like Tim Pool freak out about it for years. That's the real outcome of these seminars isn't like the actual thing that happens. It's the culture war discourse it facilitates, you know? But
I understand his reasoning for that. It's because the culture war discourse is extremely toxic.
I agree, but like
And
I
I
don't
think they're being like, this is why I sided with the right, because I think they're being improperly castigated for being more racist than they actually are. I think the same accusations could be levied against most of the people on the left and the woke movement.
Who's being castigated?
Basically, the entire Democrats' argument against the Republicans for why they don't get a say in half the shit is because they're racist. They're
You
the ones
do
being
realize
castigated.
Republicans say heinous shit about Democrats all the time, right? If your argument is unironically that Democrats are more mean, that's ridiculous. Republicans will frequently call Democrats everything they can get away with without getting kicked off C-SPAN. They will call them Satanists, they will call them pedophiles, they will say they're establishment anti-American murderous shills who want to rape your baby and then abort it. They will say anything. They are relentless. They will say the worst things about Democrats. The idea that like Democrats are the more uncivil ones in the culture war discourse just does not hold up to me in my experiences.
I'm not basing it off so much like this is where I can say I'm inferring people's actions, because I'm not basing it so much off of the actual discourse. I'm basing it off of inference of actions. I see the main problem I have with Democrats is people on the left, to be more specific, is like you have multiple arguments. I'm trying to think of a way to put this. You obviously take the time to think out your arguments very well, and you come well prepared for most of these topics. I disagree with the certain assumptions that you draw based on the evidence that you provide, but I can of course respect the fact that you bring evidence in the first place. I know you say conservatives don't, and they base it off of feelings. Or at least I've seen you say that sometimes. But I think they just look at the same evidence and draw a different conclusion than you. Of course, you would say sometimes that's a racist conclusion that they draw, and I would say the same thing about the woke movement in general, that they sometimes also draw a racist conclusion. And the main problem I have is when one group starts to force the other group to live life the way they want to, basically the moral authoritarianism that Tim always rags about. And
but
if that moral authoritarian was
take away the right to have an abortion, the Republicans have always been the moralists, the moral Puritans in this country.
I mean, I wouldn't. In some places, they're probably taking away the right to have an abortion, but most of the pro-life arguments I see are beyond a certain point. They don't want to let people have an abortion.
No, if Roe v. Wade gets taken away, it's going to be down to a state-by-state basis, and most of the Republican states are going to have full bans on abortion. Like, that's an unbelievable imposition of state power, but okay.
I mean, I don't disagree, but I also think that it's completely immoral that the Democrats allow you to have an abortion up to birth. So
they don't. It's the first 2 trimesters.
Should we pull up that's not true.
That is absolutely true. It's only with the third trimester in the case of severe risk to the mother.
No.
Yeah. Wait, am I mistaken? Wait, did you say after birth?
I'm pretty sure I said up until birth, but I know the meme. Okay. I know the meme of the one guy saying, we'll talk to the mother and see if the baby's comfortable, and then we'll decide on what we want to do. If you've seen the meme of it's the governor from Western Virginia, where he talked about that they would still talk about having an abortion after the baby was born.
I don't know what you're referring to. I guarantee you can't have abortions after you're born, because that would be murder. Obviously you wouldn't. Like, abortion is being what Trump said?
There's an actual video of it. If you give me a second to Google it, I can
talking about law. Wait, I don't care what some random politicians said. I care about law.
Well, this was something he was trying to codify into law, which was obviously pushed back on by Republicans, the pro-life people.
And wait, state by state, when abortions are legal. Okay, hold on.
Yeah, I can find the Ralph Northam is his name.
So the only state. Oh wait, so there are some states that have no limits. Okay, so most states.
It's also
have limits. Washington,
the Democratic Party. Sorry for interrupting. The Democratic Party as a whole generally okays abortion up until the third trimester. Usually, like that was one of the. I'm pretty sure. Like I
the
could be wrong.
Democratic Party. Don't
The
doctors okay abortion?
I'm getting to that. During the DNC debate, where it was like all of the candidates on the stage, I am fairly confident they asked who here would be okay with abortions up until the third trimester, and the overwhelming majority of them, if not all of them, I cannot remember perfectly, raised their hand.
But up until third trimester would mean at the end of the second trimester. Up until would mean that the first two trimesters.
Like that is my me saying what I think was said. I don't know if it was up until or if it was, in the third trimester.
There's a Snopes article in the claim you made about the Virginia governor, Ralph Northam. It says...
Yeah, I don't really care what Snopes has to say, though.
Wait, do you think Snopes is like the liberal media? Do you want me to
I think Snopes frames things in a way that they specifically want. I would prefer you to actually watch the video where he says, actually, here, hold on. I can link it to you on Discord because I just found it.
I have it here because the Snopes article links its sources. It doesn't just say something. It links all the evidence that it has to make its claim.
Well, either way, I linked it to you on Discord if you would like to watch it. But yes, he says there that they would basically, after the baby was born, talk with the parents if they would like to abort it. Obviously, it's a crazy thing to say, and I'm not saying that all Democratic senators are that way or that is a common position in the
do you think it's a little bit odd that like the Trump administration has made it clear they're trying to get rid of the legal right to abortion? Like that's a clear and present threat, and they have a 6-3 Supreme Court majority, and you're more concerned with like an out of context quote from one governor that doesn't even affect policy? I didn't even hear about this. Do you think it's interesting that the culture war has led you to this lonely battlefield while the war is raging like 2 zip codes away?
No, I don't see how this is different from what we were discussing.
You don't see how the out of context comments of one
I don't think it's
guy
out of context
in a radio show.
And I also said earlier that it was a popular Democratic position to have abortions up until or into the third trimester. I cannot remember how the question. Yes, but I also said that I cannot remember how the question was asked. I'm going off the top of my head, so please forgive me.
Why do you distrust Snopes? I've never seen any evidence that they
because Snopes likes to frame shit in ways like, for example, this would be a good Snopes article, like the suitcases that were just pulled out that content or air quotes suitcases that were pulled out for the fraudulent votes in Georgia. Snopes would say that would be a false claim because they weren't suitcases, they were bins. And Snopes likes to frame things
then they were correct.
In a very disingenuous. I mean, yes, technically, but it's a very disingenuous framing of the issue because they're able to say that the entire thing is factually incorrect because of one little aspect that wasn't what was reported.
Hey, just an offhanded question. Do you believe that Democrats rigged the election and that Trump actually won?
No, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. I think the anti-sentiment for Trump is so strong that explains why he lost more so than the Democrats rigging the election.
Okay. All right. Oh man. When people get to the point where they don't trust Snopes anymore, that's like a...
Well, I mean, why do you trust Snopes?
Because if you look at Snopes articles, they usually explain the content. Like you don't go to a Snopes article and it just says false. Like it usually gives all the relevant
I understand. Info. Yeah, but you've never gone to a Snopes article and they completely framed everything wrong.
I don't know what you mean by framing it wrong.
Like I said with the cases, me giving you an example of that because you can find tons of Snopes articles about shit just like that. What was the
example you gave me? Snopes suitcase?
It wasn't Snopes. Like I'm giving you an example of how Snopes frames it. I don't know if they specifically framed that event that way. I mean, I could probably let me hold on. Snopes.
Yeah, I'm looking more at this thing with the Virginia governor, and this just looks like it was like an ambiguous comment that he made that ended up getting taken at the worst possible interpretation. Yeah. President Trump said that the Virginia governor stated he would execute a baby after birth, which he certainly did not say, but the meaning of his statement was unclear. Was he describing a hypothetical scenario under current Virginia law or under what it would be if the legal milieu of trans bill was passed? Yeah, it just seems like a really ambiguous comment. I don't think this is like worth freaking out over. Okay, so for the Georgia
I don't agree that
suitcase
it's worth
thing,
freaking out over either, but I would say that it is
do you
a
think the 170 million women in this country might feel valid and freaking out over Trump threatening to remove their right to have an abortion?
do I think well, yeah, obviously.
Okay.
Although I wouldn't and never mind. The me bringing up the governor, I think is the same thing as the same sort of argument as bringing up the North Virginia voter thing.
No,
Because it's
because in the example of the North Virginia voter thing, I was posing a hypothetical to determine whether or not you were willing to intuit racial outcomes
Mhm.
from a given degree of evidence. But then later on, you brought up the Virginia governor thing because I was like talking about abortion or something like that as a state imposition. I don't even know what we were talking. Were we talking about libertarianism?
To an
Prior?
extent, yeah.
Yeah.
The yeah, because well, my point like I don't mean to the point of
Oh yeah, I've
libertarianism.
seen this. Yeah, this was completely faked. The Georgia suitcases thing, this wasn't because it was bins. It was because full video footage of that area showed that those bins full of ballots were in the correct place. Like it wasn't anyone stealing them off or anything like that. It was normal ballot processing. This is one of the issues with like the conservative discourse or people like Tim Pool, really. It's that they'll literally see like a picture or a video of completely normal, completely ordinary behavior, like nothing going out of the ordinary, but because they don't understand how the process works or because they know their fans don't, they'll point at it and turn it into a big controversy. The fact that there even has to be a Snopes article on suspicions around video surveillance footage of the ordinary processes of a ballot processing office, it's really, really, really strange to me. Like, how much do we have to do this? I'm pretty
So
sure that if you took video footage of literally any complicated process, the layman would probably find a couple of things they found suspicious if they were willing to look into it hard enough.
when did you volunteer to count ballots?
I'm sorry? I'm not
You
given that. I was kicked out of the DNC after my comments on Israel.
you you castigated the other side for not knowing the process, which would assume that you knew the process.
No, well, the process is known because all the people at that office have spoken up and indicated this is part of their the
Well,
normal process.
so you don't think people can lie?
Wait, oh my God. Okay, hold on.
No,
I've
I'm
let
not.
wait, wait,
I'm
wait,
not
wait, wait, wait,
defending
wait.
it. I'm
No, no, no,
asking
no,
you.
no, 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 no. Hold on. I've let you get away with a lot, okay? Sorry. Just because somebody tweets a video of surveillance footage. So here's what's happening that you're a part of, okay? This is on you. Somebody took a video of a surveillance camera of something happening in a ballot office, of somebody moving ballots, and then, with absolutely no evidence, started selling it as though something bad or wrong was happening. And then everyone at that office speaks up, getting testimony from other people who worked in ballot processing offices saying, this is totally normal, nothing here is even remotely out of the ordinary, we're literally just moving physical material from one point on the planet to another point on the planet, and you're asking me, do you think it's possible that they could lie? You
Yeah.
need to prove something bad happened. The burden
Okay.
of proof is on you and them. And that's what's happened this whole goddamn fraud election cycle. It's a million easily debunked claims that Republicans have clung to in the desperate hope they'll find the magnum opus that'll save Trump. But time after time, these are easily debunkable claims. They were making this shit on the 3rd, and they were getting debunked on the 4th, and they're still making them today. That little snake thing, the fraud image with like the Biden votes jumping, is in reference to a misreporting from Politidesk. It didn't even have anything to do with the ballot counting. It was an intern entering numbers wrong. The jump up in various counties are easily explained by completely trackable, determinable, and historically verifiable voter proportions from Biden and from Trump. Like, all of these claims are easily debunked, but they keep coming up over and over. Why the fuck would you come on here without any understanding of the issue and ask me confidently? You think people can't lie? You think that's a gotcha? I'm sorry, what exactly would prove it to you? Do I need to find God or Jesus Christ and have him come down to determine the veracity of this video? Why don't you have to find the evidence?
Are you done with your tangent yet?
This behavior frustrates me immensely, but yes, I am done with my tangent.
You completely assumed that I was making an argument that I wasn't, because I agree. The people that are like, this is a conversation I had with my father, because he's the sort of person that would see something like this and be like, see, fraud. And I'm like, well, tell me, what did you actually see in that video?
Why would you ask me if people can lie? That's a rhetorical question.
Can I explain my position, please?
Sure.
Because now what I was saying was, where I would I asked people specifically on the right what they saw in that video. And they basically said, I don't know, which is the same thing you said. You can't look at that video and know for certain if voter fraud happened based on that video. Because A, I doubt many people that watch that video actually have experience counting ballots. So they can't like be like, oh, I know this is wrong. You know, nobody ever puts ballots under the table. Like, you don't know that. You're not in there fucking counting ballots. How do you know how they do the process?
There's no evidence of misappropriate behavior. That's the only thing that I have to prove, is that there's no evidence.
Well, I mean,
can't prove there's not.
There's affidavits that say there was wrongdoing, and there's people that aren't on affidavits saying there isn't.
At that specific location, there were affidavits?
As far as I'm aware, yes. There's people that were told to leave, and that's contested, blah, blah, blah. But that is off the original point, because the original point you were making is you can't look at that video and actually make a judgment call on what you're looking at. Like, you can't look at that and be like, that is definitely voter fraud. Even the lady that palmed the USB.
You brought this up.
Can't, I know, dude. Let me finish, please. And that's why I'm saying I agree with you that you cannot look at that video and actually see what it means. But that also doesn't mean that you can make the argument that you're 100% certain that that video also means no fraud. Because
no, the video doesn't prove fraud, is what I'm certain of.
Yes, and you can't also be, well, that's, how are you certain of it if you know as much as the process about them, if you've never counted ballots and you're looking at the same video everybody else is?
Because if a video proving fraud had actually come out, it already would be being argued in a court case right now. Because millions of people have seen that video, and the only corroborating evidence that has come out has exonerated any idea that this is misappropriative behavior. If there was anything actually suspicious here, it already would be being dealt with. I do believe in unicorns because you can't prove they're not behind you. I need to be given proof of the existence of something. And you were the one who, by the way, the only reason we're talking about this is because you brought up the Snopes article about the Georgia suitcases, which, by the way, nothing in this article is like, they were bins, not suitcases. So your argument against the veracity of Snopes as a fact-finding tool is utterly unproven by the content of this article. It talks at length about the actual substance of the arguments made against that video.
Do you remember what I said before, where I said, I know this isn't an article from Snopes, but I am telling you how they improperly frame stories by giving you this example? Do you remember me saying that?
Don't
like 10 minutes ago?
Examples have to exist for them to be examples? Or did you mean like a hypothetical? Like, here's
like
why Snopes is untrustworthy. Let me make up a situation.
Well, realfactcheck.org, I'm pretty sure, is the one who did they're not actually suitcases, they're bins. But
you
Snopes
were
does incorrectly frame. Yes, I know, because you brought up Snopes as a source. I mean, like, do you think that just because you can Google an example right here on the spot that makes your argument more valid than mine? Or do you think it's possible that maybe Snopes does?
You're the one who brought up this example. I didn't bring up this example.
Yes, I brought it as a hypothetical to explain things, like you've brought up hypotheticals to explain things.
No, this is
not
hypothetical. You referred to a specific event that took place, and the event.
Yes, I know.
The contents of this article don't say what they said. You said they said.
So
it's not a hypothetical. You brought up an example.
I don't understand what you're trying to. I don't understand. Yes, it did.
Okay.
I brought up a hypothetical and I explained to you what Snopes usually does. And
I mean, do you have any evidence of that, or
like, if you actually gave me time off of a call where I can think, I can pull up plenty of Snopes articles and give you evidence. Yes.
All right, I'll keep that in mind down the line.
I mean, I understand what, like, it looks bad on my part because I can't give you an actual example, but this is why I have a problem with people.
What makes you look bad isn't your lack of info. I do the same thing. I have a very bad memory, actually. I have to Google and remind myself of stuff confidently. What makes you look bad is the smug confidence with which you reject narratives you don't support. So, for example, you asking me rhetorically, you don't think people can lie, or you hearing, or you saying something like, oh, Snopes, and then bringing up something that like didn't actually happen. That's what makes you look bad. It's not having the info. If you had just said, I have concerns about the veracity of Snopes, but I'd have to take some time to look into it. No, in fact, I think chat would have respected you for it, because it's like, oh shit, you know, the limits of knowledge. But that's the thing. And Tim Pool does this too. That's one of the things. If you go to Tim Pool, you debate him. He's got a computer to fact check in front of him. You don't. So it's very, very easy for him to make claims. He goes on them. He can run down those lines. You can't fact check because you don't have the computer in front of you. And I think those tendencies, or the consequences of those tendencies, may come down to the people who watch his content as well.
Well, that's a disingenuous assumption to put on me, but
well, I said I think. I mean, I can't.
Do you think that places like Snopes cannot be biased and not
asking these rhetorical
want to frame a specific narrative?
Of course, everything can be biased. Just prove
it. Because you're bringing it up like it's the gold standard of.
I just want proof. So. Everything has a bias. I have a bias.
Okay. And that's why I asked you, don't you think people can lie? Because you're basing your argument off of like assuming that these people are telling the truth.
It's a meaningless rhetorical question. What I'm assuming is that there's no evidence of wrongdoing, which I'm correct on. There's a reason why that video was big in the media for 2 days and nobody's talking about it anymore. They've moved from one lie to another lie to another lie, so on and so forth. But when you ask stuff like that, you don't think people can lie, you're not actually conveying any information besides the fact that you disagree with me.
Yep.
Okay,
but the difference is that I don't think I have the right to shove my beliefs down your throat. What do you think you have the right to shove your beliefs down mine?
What does that mean? We've been over this.
It's what it all comes back to. That's the reason I'm against the left and I sided with the right culture.
What do you mean shoving my beliefs down your throat? What do you mean? What does that mean? You already agreed earlier. You just mean that that term just means talking to somebody. Do I not have a right to talk to you? Does the left not have a right to talk?
Well, I didn't really agree to that. I said that when you codify what you want other people to do into law, that's what I specifically have a problem with. Forcing, well, basically,
careful, you're about to talk about policy.
For example, any of the quote unquote anti-racist stuff.
What anti-racist laws do I want to put into
specifically
place?
The ones that discriminate against people now to try to get equality of outcome situations.
Like what?
Affirmative action.
Okay, so you don't like affirmative action?
I didn't say that. I don't like equality of outcome. Affirmative action
for equality of outcome.
Well, Kamala Harris did put out a video
No, Kamala Harris is not fighting for equality of outcome.
Okay.
It's equality of opportunity. Nobody wants equality of outcome. Marx argued against equality of outcome.
I kind of did. I mean, that video did say so everybody reaches the same outcome.
Kamala Harris in that video literally said, so we can all fight on an even playing field. Does that sound like equality of outcome or opportunity to you?
Well, I don't know. The part that I quoted kind of sounds like it backs up my argument, and the part you
want to look at the video together?
Backs up your argument.
Kamala Harris equality of outcome video. There's a big difference between. Yep, here we go. Hold on. I'm going to link it to you. It's 50 seconds, 6.4 million views on Twitter. Here we go. Linking it to you. I'm going to watch it quietly with my chat for 50 seconds, and I'll be right back.
So there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equality suggests, everyone should get the same amount. The problem with that, not everybody's starting out from the same place. So if we're all getting the same amount, but you started out back there and I started out over here, we can get the same amount, but you're still gonna be that far back behind me. It's about giving people the resources and the support they need so that everyone can be on equal footing and then compete on equal footing. Equitable treatment means we all end up at the same place.
All right, we watched it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
I sent you a picture of the part that I have a contention with.
Yeah, the video literally shows the ground rising up underneath the black person as though their opportunity is being equaled. The argument Kamala Harris is making is that if you have equality of opportunity, you're going to get equality of outcome. Which I generally agree with, vaguely. Obviously, there's individual variants, but yeah, if everyone's given the same access to schooling and housing and stuff like that, we're all going to be way more on par than we are right now.
This is one of the things that I find interesting, how we both can watch the same thing and come to different conclusions, because you've seen one thing, you've seen the visual of the ground raising up and you're like, this means quality of opportunity. And I seen the end part where it literally says equitable treatment means we all end up in the same place.
Yeah, but equitable treatment is equality of opportunity. The thing that's being advocated for in the video, the actual action, the thing that's being proposed, the policy, that's equality of opportunity. She's only saying it leads to equality of outcome, which is defensible. Don't you agree that if we all got equal access to schooling, it would lead to us being more equal in terms of our like general performance? Maybe if we had equal access to education and equal access to housing and food and all that crap, maybe the black-white IQ gap wouldn't be where it is right now. Like, there are outcomes that can be made more even because of the opportunity we start with.
I don't disagree with you, but I find it interesting how we both watched the same exact video, but yet we both came to completely different conclusions. Obviously, you'll say I'm wrong with my conclusion. Obviously, I will say you were wrong with your conclusion. But it's one of those things that I find intellectually interesting when I have these sorts of debates with people.
I just don't think there's anything in this video that's really worth getting upset about.
I never said I was upset about it. I just said the video pushed the quality of outcome because it says right at the end.
Well, it says equality of outcome is desirable. Do you not believe that equality of outcome at least should be some sort of goal, in the sense at least that we all make it in life, we all like succeed together, like there's not a bunch of inequality in society?
I would say that it's an admirable goal, but the only way to reach it is to generally discriminate against a specific group.
What if we just increased equality of opportunity? Wouldn't that do a good job of making
that? Would be great. I'm full on fucking support of that. I love equality of opportunity, completely dislike equality of outcome.
But isn't that's what the video is pushing for? They said
I disagree. See, this is your interpretation of the video.
No, it advocated for competing on equal footing. That's literally
and I mean, it literally
of equality.
I mean, yeah, it literally says at the end too that
you arrive at equality of outcome. That's at the end, only after the change has been made. The change was to the equality of opportunity.
You've seen a visual and assumed that's what the video meant. I'm going off of what the video actually says.
What? No. Oh my God. The video actually says equality of opportunity. It talks about equal footing. It talks about raising the bar so that we start at the same place. That's the change that was made. Okay, so let's break this down. This is media analysis, okay? So when the video starts, the two individuals, the white and the black one, are on uneven ground. They're not starting from the same position. This would be inequality of opportunity. And then a change is made. The change is what the video is advocating for. The change is what raises the footing of the black individual up equal to the footing of the white individual. Thus, the change the video is advocating for is an adjustment in the equality of opportunity. And then, after the equality of opportunity is achieved, they are able to compete on an equal playing field and they achieve equality of outcome. But that's only as a product of equality of opportunity being established, no?
I mean, I don't disagree that equality of outcome is worth, like, I'm trying to think of a way to say this. Equality of opportunity is a very, very good thing to strive for, but there's no way to get equality of outcome without actually discriminating against people.
The argument in the video is that we can get more equality of outcome if we have equality of opportunity.
See, but you have to assume that she means equality of opportunity, and I'm
to lean towards your argument. Don't. This is really
yes, you do. She doesn't literally say equality of opportunity, but she literally says equality of outcome.
You talk about bias and framing, but it's unfathomable to me how biased you would have to be to see this video as an indication that she wants to implement policies to enforce equality of outcome. Like, to me, that's an unfathomable reach. When the video literally shows and explains equality of opportunity.
Okay, that's interesting. The video doesn't actually literally say equality of opportunity, but it literally says equitable treatment means we all end up at the same place. It literally
as an
says
outcome, equitable treatment is equality of opportunity. That's literally what equitable
that's your assumption.
So, all right. So what other culture war things do I want to shove down your throat?
It's more like it's just more or less a general forcing people to basically fit to you. Well,
what? But no, the specifics, please specifics. Don't just like vaguely say like the woke mob wants to force you to do whatever.
I can't just gesture broadly then. I'm making a joke, but I get it.
I don't know. Are you? I don't know. No. There have been groups of people pushing for changes in public behavior for literally as long as human civilization has existed. This isn't anything new. The woke mob that you describe is identical in character to the abolitionists or the suffragettes or to the revolutionaries before them, or to the absolutionists, or to the Church of England Protestants. If you go back, there's always a group of people, and they're angry about how society is, and they're trying to change it. So I don't want like vague, there are woke mobs. Like what, like how is you complain about the culture war. What are we doing to force our ideas down your throat? Like what are we trying to change?
Well, one of the good ones, but I've seen you rail against this in the past, is how we're basically trying to teach kids woke progressivism in school. And you'll be like, well, what's bad about that, right?
Well, yeah, like what?
Well, do you think you have the right to, like, let's put aside the fact that I completely agree with you. If you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the other person is immoral, then yes, you would have a right to teach them your set of morals. We are in agreement on that point beyond just completely 100% agree with you on that point, just so we are clear. But I don't think that you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that your set of moral values is better than the conservative set of moral values. Therefore, I think that it is wrong.
What moral values are we? Wait. I don't know what moral values we're talking about. Who writes the textbooks? Right now, it's mostly done by like conservatives in Texas. Like I don't know. What are we talking about right now? What moral?
You think
values?
Every school everywhere uses the same textbook?
No, but most there's a company out of Texas. What is it called, chat? I know you know. There's like one really, really big company that manages a lot of the production of Pearson. Is it Pearson? Yeah. Oh wait, Pearson, Houghton. Okay, there are a couple of them, but they tend to be pretty milquetoast conservative. And it varies, of course, from school to school and from district to district and from grade level to grade level. But I think they have a lot of control over it. Usually, the woke stuff you're referring to is discretion done on the part of teachers because there aren't textbooks for everything. For example, sex ed generally doesn't correspond to a textbook. Biology textbooks usually have a section in them about the human body, but usually sex ed is handled kind of off the cuff in a decentralized way. We don't really have like a...
Here's a good one for you. Like, do you think it is morally okay to teach kids the whole gender spectrum and all of that fun stuff?
What gender spectrum?
What do you mean, what gender? You've never heard of it?
You mean like that there are men and women and those are socially ordained roles, but that they're not like inherently biologically true?
Well, I mean, I disagree with the second half of that, but the first half was on par.
Oh. Well, I mean, nothing that I just described, everything that I described is factually correct. So,
well, I know you would say that, but
no, I would be correct. Yeah. So they can teach that. Yeah. I don't want the kids being taught lies. So yeah, I would want them to be
agree there. So you don't think that there is studies that are for your ideology and there's other studies on the other side against?
What studies are there that are anti my ideology here?
So you don't think there's anybody out there scientifically saying that, you know, men are men, women are women?
What are men are? Of course men are men. What else would men be? That's tautological. So, rocks are rocks. You know, if you grind a rock down enough, it turns into sand?
That genders are social constructs? Wasn't that where you were going with?
Yeah, but gender is objectively a social construct. That's not like a scientific disagreement argument thing. That's just what it is.
And this is one of the main reasons that I think it's wrong to shove your beliefs down their throat.
We're not shoving any belief. It's literally just what the word means. It's just what the word means.
What?
That's what gender means. Sex refers to biological attributes, and then gender refers to social attributes that are assigned to sex or are correlated with sex. So, for example, the fact that men tend to wear suits, that's not biological. There's no biological reason why we had to wear the three-piece suit and why people with vaginas generally are the ones who wear flowy dresses. That's completely arbitrary. And there have been points in history where the reverse is the case or whatever. But we decide on it, we've set on it, and it seems to be really, really conventionally believed now. So the suit thing, the suit dress thing, that's gender, you know? But, like, that's not biological. There's not a gene in my body that makes it so that I get, like, the shivers when I wear a dress. Unless it's cold outside, I guess, but...
I mean, I get it, but, I've seen gender and sex used interchangeably, so I generally use them interchangeably, too. What I'm more, like... I've gone over much of the
Where do you see them used interchangeably?
On the left all the time. I mean, you can say that some people are using them wrong, sure, but I'm like I see them used interchangeably, and it's not
Where in the
like
left are people using sex and gender interchangeably?
Gestures broadly.
Well, but
like I'm serious, just
the left
gestures
is the
broadly.
group
There's
that
so many.
tends to delineate this distinction really, really
I know,
concretely.
and they do. Like, it's strange that maybe some of them are using it wrong. I don't know.
But, like,
I'm
what
not
are they
assuming
saying?
malice on their part.
Are they saying
I'm
like
just saying they use it interchangeably. Like, I've not
this
seen
is
it
my
consistently
gender
used.
penis
Like,
or something? I like what are
no,
they
just
doing
like,
to
today I'm identifying as a specific gender, or I'm changing gender identity, sex identity. I've seen it used that way, even though I'm pretty sure gender identity is the correct one,
you mean
and sex
sexual
identity is
identity?
wrong.
Like sexual identity, like who they're attracted to?
Well, that I know is different. That's you got bisexual, pansexual,
I guess
lesbian, gay.
I've just
blah,
been
blah,
in the
blah.
left for a long time. I've never once seen anyone say I sex identify as a X. Now, I don't think I've ever seen that phrase used. But we're excuse me, we're a little off the beaten path. We were talking about education. I don't think teachers are telling kids that they can sex identify as one thing or another. So, like, why
I don't think they are either, but I think we're teaching, let's say, factually unfounded stuff to kids because they fit the current activism of wokeness.
Like what?
Critical theory would be a good example.
We were
something
talking
that's
about
not
gender
entirely,
stuff, though.
I know. Well, technically, parts of gender being a social construct, or sex being a social construct, is part of critical theory. So
gender is
it's not entirely wrong for me to.
Well, technically, sex is a social construct as well, but that's like a whole other tier of.
Okay, so
yeah.
we're in agreement that I wasn't off base then, because it is
sure. But I thought we were
theory.
talking about like gender and sex stuff. But like, what are kids being taught about gender and sex that's harmful?
Well, I never said that it was harmful. I said I don't think people on the left have a right to shove their beliefs down somebody else's throat.
No, we don't. Wait. Again, stop using that term because it doesn't mean anything.
Okay, can you tell me, please, a different term to use that won't bother you?
I don't know what you mean. You mean like we shouldn't advocate our positions, or?
No, I don't think you should codify your beliefs into law.
Wait, who determines? Wait, but you haven't even found. We've been talking about this for 30 minutes, and the first thing you finally settled on that you could find as an example for us codifying our belief into law is our school curriculum. But school curriculums aren't controlled by leftists. And now we're talking about gender and sex, but you haven't given an example for how that's bad. So, like, what are we talking about? Conservatives codify their beliefs into law all the time.
I didn't know I had to. Well, yeah, and I would have a problem if they did it too.
No, they do.
Like,
they do.
Not factually founded, and they're just codifying their belief.
Who chooses school curriculums then?
I guess it would depend on the school you go to, wouldn't it? And the teacher you have in the school. I mean, it's kind of like an individual choice.
So what's the issue? The teachers are teaching their kids that trans people are valid or whatever. What's the issue? You keep saying the left shoving down their throat. What are we talking about here?
With what you just said, I don't have an issue with that. I don't like when factually untrue things are pretty much forced onto people. Like if the right was like, we want everybody to be religious, so we're going to force everybody to go to religious schools.
Wait,
I'd have a problem with that.
Wait, okay, so first of all, that's not forcing an idea on somebody. That's compelling a person to convert, which I think is a much, much more serious thing. But second of all, again, stop vaguely. Like, what is the left doing to push our ideology? You keep saying that with such conviction, but we've been running this down, and so far you haven't found like a single thing. The left is like trying to force.
I've gone over two things so far, both with gender and sex. Those ideas that aren't factually proven down. And then you also have basically anti-racism in general.
Wait. Okay, first of all, wait. Again, I said you can't vaguely gesture. There are always people trying to change the world. We're talking about policy. If you just said legislating morality, so let's talk about legislation. So you said nothing about gender and the gender teaching kids in school. You didn't even say you had a problem with it. So I don't know what the issue is there. Where is the left trying to legislate morality that you disagree with?
I didn't have a problem with the example you used. I have a problem with people teaching kids factually untrue things about the world.
Like what?
How many times do I have to repeat the much of what comes in the whole gender and sex?
Like, no, what bundle is incorrect?
Well, here we go. Because you have studies that are showing that it is factually true, and there are also studies that I can pull up that are showing that it is not factually true.
What is factually true?
Like this is a gesture broadly. Like
No, what? You can't do that, man. Dude, does it concern you that your political motivations, you can't even like elaborate what it is that motivates you?
You want me to point to a very, very specific thing when I don't know what you want to.
You're critiquing the invalidity of gender
theory,
ideology.
Like multiple times.
No, but like what thing? What thing is false? Well, like, do you want me to run down premises and you can like I can remind you of premises? Fine. Okay, here. So trans people are valid. Gender is a socially constructed spectrum.
Opinion.
Huh?
Opinion.
Of course, they're opinions. Do you think they're wrong? You realize? Wait. You realize the term?
I said I want.
Wait. You realize all people are created equal is an opinion, right? You realize the Declaration of Independence is an opinion, right? You realize the Constitution is full of legal opinions, right? Of course, it's opinion. We're talking about ethics. So, what here do you disagree with?
Well, then I would disagree with your ethics.
What is wrong with the ethics of trans people are valid?
Well, see, that's kind of the weird fallback, isn't it? Like saying like, oh, well, if you disagree with this, then you're saying trans people are not valid.
Well, what, do you disagree with it?
Disagree with what?
I don't know. You're the one complaining about woke police controlling thought. You
keep misdirecting and going to these silly arguments like, are you suggesting trans people aren't valid?
What silly arguments? What factually incorrect thing are they teaching in school with regards to sex and gender?
Well, if we go back to what we were just talking about, where you said blah, blah, blah is a social construct, and I said opinion. So that would be one of the factually untrue things that they're teaching.
Wait. Opinion doesn't mean it's factually untrue. Things which are in the realm of opinion remain opinion. All matters regarding legality and ethics and sociology are to some extent informed by the theories which are born of opinion. That doesn't make them incorrect. If your concern is just that they're an opinion, so is 95% of what you get taught in school. You think your textbooks are driven entirely by factual information?
No, but that's like one hell of a semantic argument you got there.
That's not semantic. Nothing that I just said is semantics. Semantics is when you argue with the definition of word. I specifically said I have a problem with teaching kids factually untrue things about the world. What is factually untrue? So wait, are you arguing?
Wait. Now we're going back to this again.
Okay, wait. Okay, hold on. Can you teach kids things which are matters of opinion? Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay. So, do you acknowledge that because a thing is an opinion does not mean it's factually incorrect?
I would say yes, but I am substituting opinion for something that isn't backed up by empirical data.
You can't back up everything with empirical data. What about you shouldn't murder people? That's an opinion. Now, you can argue about data surrounding murder, but at the end of the day, you have to make an ethical leap.
Okay, and I would say some of the things involved in that are ethically wrong.
Murder?
No. In teaching kids opinions that aren't backed up by evidence. Okay, specific opinions.
Okay, you can't. Oh, God. Stop bringing up evidence, okay? You keep jumping back and forth between opinion and evidence, okay? So you say it's morally wrong. So that's an opinion of yours, okay? So your opinion is that the opinions inherent to gender and sexual education to children nowadays, the woke shit, okay, is wrong. So in what way do you think it's unethical?
What I have a problem with is specifically, sorry, I've been up for a while, so this is like the worst I've done in the conversation. So I do apologize. Even though
it is a-okay, no worries, my friend.
There's a whole bunch of different problems that I have with that movement as a whole. Well, I wouldn't say movement. With that, I don't agree with calling it an academic field or study, but I do acknowledge that, you have to, when you first start a new academic field, obviously everything you put out isn't going to be factually true because you're still like learning the field. People are still experimenting, progressing and stuff like that. So I have no problem with that. I have a problem with basically, I see the arguments on the right just as strong as the arguments for the left against these sorts of
What
issues.
arguments?
Like against gender being a social construct.
What are the
or
arguments?
The arguments from the right that I agree with, or
Yes.
what do you get?
What are your arguments against my beliefs?
Well, specific, like, do you want to do whataboutism where we go back and forth on this, or would you like to get to the meta point?
No, I just want you. You've been gesturing at woke
I know,
people forcing their
but
words in your throat for like an hour, but you are incapable of specifically referring to a thing you disagree with.
Okay, no, I am not. I think it is morally wrong to encourage you, or for you to encourage trans people to get hormone treatments and surgery as much as you do, and to downplay the severity of the downsides, because you say there's like barely any doctors out there that you would fuck this up, or to not. Or one of the things you said in your video about Elliot Page coming out was you specifically said you bet there are very, very few doctors or institutions that would not properly psychologically screen people to make sure that they were making the correct decision. Now, with that burden of proof, please let me finish here, because I'm giving you a specific example like you asked. I would agree with you if the burden of proof was reached, like if everything you said in that video where you expect, psychiatric evaluations, blah, 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 before people permanently damage and alter their body. I think it is morally, just morally wrong in basically every way to encourage people, to the extent that the cultural left does, to have people permanently alter their body and not to properly inform them of the downsides that they could face. I think that is inhumane.
Okay, okay. Do you think adults should be able to do whatever they want with their body?
Obviously.
Okay, so we're talking about
I have no problem with the trans people doing that with their body. No problem whatsoever. It's their body. They control it, everything. I have a problem with the people that are encouraging them to do that to their body without also telling them about the downside.
For young people or for adults?
For both.
But I thought adults can do whatever they want.
They can, but I have a problem with the people that are encouraging people to hurt themselves.
How are we encouraging them to hurt themselves?
Well, are you familiar with the Abigail Schreier lady that just wrote a book on the downsides of gender dysphoria, and her book was like taken off the shelves in multiple places?
I'm not familiar with Abigail Schreier.
I think that's her name. I could be wrong, but
irreversible damage, the transgender craze seducing our daughters. Oh yeah, I can understand a couple of reasons why this may have gotten taken off the shelves. This is a turf. Yeah, I think I've even covered her content before.
Well, it's nice that you can group her into something that you don't like. And
it's an accurate description of her position. Come on, don't get triggered by the language. It's an accurate description of her positions. I haven't actually read it myself. Everybody I've heard who's read it has spoken very negatively about it, not just in terms of its morality, but also the actual scientific rigor with which it pursues its arguments. But so wait.
What about Dr. Deborah So?
So wait, in what way do I downplay the harm done to your
body?
What
about Dr. Deborah So?
What?
Dr. Deborah So.
She's a fucking moron. Yeah, I've gone over a lot of her stuff. She's a fucking idiot. It's actually So is actually one of those people who makes me think that I shouldn't go back for my PhD, because I've basically intellectually surpassed every conservative that I'll need to argue with who already has one. So like, it doesn't even matter to me, Now she's a fucking moron. I went over some of her segments when she talked with Joe Rogan. She just spurts out a bunch of what would the phrase be? Highly unscientific dogma. There's very little actual like academic justification to her positions.
And you don't think people would say that about your positions?
Well, they would be wrong. That's the difference.
Well, that's your opinion.
No, it's actually not in this case. I would defend my arguments with empirical evidence. That's the difference. Okay, I'm not as much of a postmodernist as you are. I do believe in empirical truth.
Yeah, so do I. But I'm saying, do you think they can't defend their opinions with evidence either?
Oh, no.
Or are you just dismissing their evidence as wrong?
No, they can't. Well, the evidence they provide is wrong.
That's disingenuous.
Sure. I mean, we're not arguing with her right now, but...
Well, I mean, if you agree that that is disingenuous, then I do think you...
How is it disingenuous for me to disagree?
No, I'm saying I say it's disingenuous for her to say that she's providing no evidence and you just to discard the evidence that she does provide.
Well, if I'm sorry, when I say evidence, I mean good evidence. Like, if she provided a rock and was like, this is evidence that trans people are bad, I would say you have no evidence. And then she'd go like, no, you do have evidence. She'd hold up the rock, and I'd be like, well, okay, I meant like modern, I like relevant, pertinent evidence. Okay, look, so you say we downplay the harm done. What harm do I downplay?
You're encouraging people to permanently alter their body and change their body irreversibly in some cases.
How so?
And
like,
you're
so
just
there are a couple of things we're talking about. We have hormone blockers, which are typically given to adolescents or pre-adolescents to prevent or delay puberty to the point where they can make a decision about where they want to go forward gender-wise. We have hormone therapy, which is testosterone or estrogen, and it's given, and they take it for a long, long time, and it feminizes or masculinizes a certain part of your body. And then we have top and bottom surgery, respectively, which actually makes direct physical alterations to your body. So of the three here, what are we talking about?
all.
Okay, so we can break this down one by one. So in what way am I I don't think I've ever encouraged people to get like bottom surgery on this channel. If you want to, like, you can.
Well,
that is a big commitment, and there are
specific-
absolutely risks involved. I think I've even been clear. Chat, haven't I been clear in the past that bottom surgery, like surgical elements of transition, while not invalid, are like they can convey a risk? Okay, chat's reminded me I have, because surgery is risky, and this is like a developing science. So we can ignore that with HRT and testosterone. Do you think I've been irresponsible in encouraging people to get like hormone therapy?
I don't know enough about your positions in particular to say that, but I would say the woke movement as a whole, and well, actually more so the liberals. The liberals seem to be the ones that are encouraging this sort of stuff more so than the woke movement. But I would say, I think people are looking for the next civil rights argument, and they're encouraging people to, like, I've almost never heard anybody on the right, like, you criticize, I've seen the video on your channel of you criticizing Steven Crowder, and even he's never said anything as extreme as trans people don't have the right to exist. He's just encouraged people to be more cautious.
Of course they don't see, nobody says that. Of course, you don't have to go on YouTube and say, I think trans people should be lined up against the wall and shot to be a transphobe. Steven Crowder is really, really transphobe. Do we need to get in the grill on that one? He literally, like, all his videos on trans people are just making fun of them for being gross. Like, most of his videos on trans people don't even get into the substantive arguments behind it. He's mostly just mocking them.
Well, he's definitely got into substantial arguments behind it, because I make it a point to watch everybody's videos that I disagree with.
I've seen his videos too, man. Sometimes he throws up studies on the screen for like a quarter second so that you can't actually read them, and they're not even about the thing he's talking about. I remember that one. I saw that one early on my channel. He flashed something on the screen, and it was about like, it was some completely irrelevant study with regards to trans people. It had nothing to do with what he was talking about. But I mean, I guess I haven't seen all of his videos on trans people. Maybe he makes a couple of good arguments. I haven't seen all of them. So what harm do you think is being done? Do you think people are like being too ready in pursuing gender transition or whatever?
Basically, I think we are, like I said, I think people are looking so much for the next civil rights movement, and they're kind of doing it with Black Lives Matter, that we are encouraging people to make decisions that they wouldn't otherwise make. Like,
do you really think there are people who are going to psychiatric evaluation and doing years of therapy so they can spend a bunch of money and radically change their life because they're being peer pressured into being like girls?
Yeah. Haven't you ever seen anybody like fucking start lifting weights because they're being peer pressured for being weak?
Yeah, the difference
is
it
definitely does happen.
The difference is so there are a bunch of differences here. First of all, you can just start lifting weights, whereas transitioning is like a life-altering process that will radically change every element of your social.
Exactly.
Right. So it's much easier to just start lifting weights. Additionally, people get bullied for being like weak. People don't really get bullied for being like guys. Like, haha, you're a guy. You'd be better as a girl, you little guy. Well, I mean, maybe some parts of the world. I didn't experience that.
Do you think men are targeted specifically because they're men now?
In what way?
Bullies aren't, like, if a bully is at a high school, he's not going to go up to a girl and push her against the locker and be like, fuck you, bitch. He's going to do it to a guy.
You should talk to some girls. Dude, guy bullies bully guys. Girl bullies bully girls. Girl bullies are vicious to girls.
Girl bullies are usually more reputationally vicious than they are physically vicious. Men bullies are usually more physical versus, but this is, it's...
Yeah, what do we mean about, like, trans people or whatever? Like where are we...
Well, I was bringing up because we can go back to the trans argument since we got off on a little tangent there. But
like people, I really don't think people are getting peer pressured to transitioning. You know,
you don't think it's a cultural fad right now for people to be trans and to transition into...
Do you think it was a cultural fad for people to engage in miscegenation back in the 1960s? Like, for example, back in the 1960s, say 68, would you feel comfortable going up to a black and white couple and thinking, they're only doing it because of the fad. We need to tone down how much we're pushing this culturally?
Well, I think that is, are they permanently damaging their body to be in an interracial couple?
In the 1960s, there are severe social consequences to miscegenation.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
They're not damaging their bodies, but there are some severe down the line consequences. And
I don't disagree.
Some of them black guys, by the way, there were consequences to their body because all the fucking white folk that chased them down after.
I think that is a very bad comparison, and I've also seen you compare trans people right now to gay people in the past, and I think that is an also disingenuous comparison because
but
gay people in the past permanently altered their body.
How is my comparison there not valid?
Because what does an interracial couple have to do with the trans person today?
Because in both cases, you're arguing that a recent surgence of something that is a product of civil rights development is a fad and that it's dangerous and shouldn't be undertaken so lightly. I wouldn't exactly say this is a civil rights development. I would say that it more so is a cultural fad than a civil rights. Trans rights are unquestionably civil rights. They meet every conceivable definition of a civil rights fight. We've argued over the validity as individuals, the extent to which they're being targeted and harassed as minorities, their legal rights. This is unquestionably a civil rights issue. It's probably not as big in civilization sweeping as like the civil rights movement, but I think to say it's not a civil rights movement like in like capital C, lowercase c, lowercase r, I think that's pretty incorrect. I think it's definitely a civil rights argument.
I mean, I don't inherently disagree that it is a civil rights argument, but I think it's misframed as I'm trying to think of how to put it. I don't think it's at all the same thing as what you compare it to as in being gay back like 50, 60 years ago. I think it's a completely different thing. And I think encouraging people like if gay, like I did research about this because I like double checking my own, opinions to see if they have any merit. So I Googled prior to us talking because this thought actually popped into my head, whether or not or how prevalent conversion therapy was towards gay people back in the day, because that conversion therapy could be argued to be a physical alteration of a person's body. I
think difference is that
right?
Conversion therapy for gay people has only ever been to their detriment, whereas transitioning for trans people is to their benefit. So it's kind of like the opposite.
Well, in some degree, like almost every video you put out about trans people, I scroll through the comments and I find at least 3 or 4 comments saying like, I transitioned to the opposite sex and then I realized it wasn't for me and I transitioned back.
I think you're lying to me right now. I don't think that's the case. There's actually data on how frequent detransitioning is. It's not very frequent at all. That's because we have very strict legal and medical requirements before people are given the medical go-ahead to transition.
And do you think those requirements are always upheld in every single situation?
There's no such thing as, it's never perfect. It's never perfect.
Of course.
But the existing system that we have seems to produce very few regretful people.
I would say that is a bias in your sample size. Well, I do, but all of the evidence you said is stupid and not evidence. You compared it to a rock, so...
Wait, do you have a study that indicates there's a significant number of detransitioning people? If you do, I want to look at it. I mean, I want to be right, so...
Hold on, I was looking at something the other day, but I can't remember what the fuck I Googled to find it. I think that might be it. The 2 people that you completely threw their arguments out the window, they are the people that would, like, I'm 100% sure her book and probably anything Dr. Devereux has done has also.
Yeah, I've gone through some of the evidence. They're usually wrong. Like, it's just bad studies.
Yeah.
Hold on. I can say that with confidence. I have a sociology degree. Statistical analysis and multivariate regressive analysis were literally things that I were taught on and tested on. So I'm very capable of looking through a study and determining whether or not that study was conducted in a valid way. Obviously, I can only do this with sociological studies. I can't do this with, like, a physics study or whatever, but I can absolutely do this with the types of studies they go through. Very often, these people rely on incredibly shoddy anecdotal studies, which derive information from people who aren't even transgender. They conflate different variables or different groups of people. There's a particularly bad study, which I'm aware of, which asserts that 75% of people who experience gender dysphoria end up later being cisgender, which is, of course, complete nonsense. It was more along the lines of, if you took a look at every little boy who's ever worn a dress or worn lipstick, of them, how many people end up actually being trans? 25% is a pretty shocking number of that, by the way. But they do these studies all the time. It's very easy to go through, very easy to debunk. But if you have a new one for me, I'm happy to look at it.
Well, I mean, this is one of the reasons that I always gesture broadly, because if we argue about individual specifics like this, you're going to say my evidence is shit. I'm going to say your evidence is shit. And what does that actually accomplish?
Postmodernist flair coming out again. I can make arguments for why I believe your evidence is shit. If you provide, and I can make arguments for why I believe your evidence is shit. Do you? Wait, if I gave you studies on how infrequent detransitioning is, do you have the academic background necessary?
You don't need an academic background in order to figure it out. Improper framing.
Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it helps. Yes,
I would agree. But you, like, being accredited doesn't mean that much to me. I mean, in some degrees, in some respects, yes. But being accredited in terms of overall intellectual capacity doesn't mean much to me.
Well, then I look forward to any evidence you can provide down the line. So how would you deal with trans people? Say, excuse me, say you control society. You could call the shots. What would you do with trans people? Like, how would you handle? What age can they start doing what? How encouraged should X be? What are you in favor of?
Well, this is kind of a easy way for you to poke holes in all of the things I believe, but setting me up for it a little bit. But I would say almost everything we are doing now is okay in my book. The main thing that I have except for specifically transitioning kids, I have contentions with individual cases as far as transitioning kids go, and I also have issues with how individual cases were handled. Like, dad didn't want to transition, mom did, so they took kid away from dad. And I know you'll probably be like, oh, I know there's one specific thing, and there was all bullshit.
I'm familiar with that exact thing, and that dad was a piece of shit. That was covered in a Blair White video. Yeah, I know. Now, that's not ground you want to defend.
I'm sure there's more than one individual case, but sure. I have a problem with these sorts of specific things. I think people are encouraging trans people for their own political clout, for example. I think
you just said you don't have a problem with how things are handled generally. So once again, rather than policy, you're going to fall back to some nebulous woke boogeyman who's harming the world, except you can't think of any specific reasons why or consequences or...
Well, you kind of interrupted me while I was talking, and I did give you specific reasons why. I don't like encouraging people to harm themselves without the actual evidence being in. What? You claim you have the evidence, and I dispute it.
Wait, I haven't provided any evidence for you to dispute. Wait, you keep saying
I gave you two doctors.
You just said the way we handle this is fine.
I said generally.
Yeah, so what specific parts?
Okay, well, if you would have let me finish, I would have told you. Like, I agree with most of it, but that does not mean all. Big difference there. So I have a problem with specifically how we handle the transitioning of kids.
Okay, what about it do you want to change?
We should be a lot more fucking careful with it, and we shouldn't be as culturally aggressive for people to transition. And
how careful? What specific legal or medical policies do you think would be preferable? Because we already have extremely stringent protections of children when it comes to medical stuff like this.
I'm aware. And despite that, it's still happening. People are still getting transitioned and regretting it later. And
how many?
They're doing... Don't you think this is a little pedantic?
No, I think it's actually really important when we're talking about policies that affect millions of people to be specific about the amount of harm being done.
I agree. Okay. And you've completely discredited, like, you've just thrown out all the evidence I've given you.
You haven't provided any evidence. I just asked you a question. I just asked you a question.
Dr. Deborah So.
Citing a person isn't evidence. You haven't provided evidence.
Okay.
So wait, what changes would you make with the kids?
Do you think they haven't?
What changes? No rhetorical questions. What changes would you want to make? How many years do you think a child should have to go through pediatric therapy before they can be prescribed hormone blockers? How many years after taking hormone blockers do you think it's acceptable for them to be prescribed hormone
Are you going to
therapy?
be happy with an I don't know answer?
Do you think there's like a lever we can push or pull in a given direction that you would prefer?
Yeah, less.
You want less time?
No, I want us to encourage it less.
But what do you mean encourage? What does that mean? Doctors aren't encouraging it. So just so
there's
you know,
one guy I
doctors
know who
don't
made
like
a
find
video.
doctors don't find like little like pediatricians don't get like little 11-year-old boys in their office and they're like, don't you think it'd be more fun to be a girl, little boy, or something like that? I don't know what you mean by pressuring. We're talking about policy. So what policy
You don't
changes?
think you're pressuring people to transition?
Kids?
I don't know. You fucking tell me.
No. I mean, I think that if you're young and if you demonstrate psychological issues that correspond to gender dysphoria and you have a therapist and you spend years with that therapist and that time leads you to collectively believe, with the consent of a doctor, that it might be advantageous to prescribe hormone blockers so you have more time to avoid puberty and then maybe you can get prescribed hormones down the line, I think that's defensible. But but that's medical procedure. That's medical procedure. That's not my political belief.
And let me ask you this: considering the fact that people on the right, I know you don't really care much about what they have to say, but considering the fact that some of this evidence, as far as gender dysphoria and all of that goes, is disputed, do you think we should wait as a society until we know more about all of this before we start?
What evidence about gender dysphoria
people
is disputed? The belief that transitioning is the proper treatment to gender dysphoria is considered medical practice across the world. Like, this isn't woke PC people. This is medical consensus. This is known. Like, if you picked up a textbook, like, it would have what I'm telling you in it. I'm not giving you like the
more
activist
modern
approach.
textbooks, yes, and
Yes.
technically it is the activist approach.
I'm sorry.
But I said technically it kind of is the activist approach
How?
because you completely threw out all counter evidence to
No,
your
we
claim.
didn't. No, come on. You're a conspiracy
I did.
theorist, dude. You're arguing against modern scientific plurality.
No, I'm not. I'm saying there are studies on both sides that say
you keep saying.
counter things.
Listen, hold on, please. You keep saying all studies like you're an enlightened centrist and these all mean the same. Maybe this is your postmodernist bent, okay?
They definitely
Your
don't mean
studies are worthless. First of all, quit bringing them up in this convo. You haven't given me any studies to look at. So in the context of this conversation, nothing has been debunked because you haven't provided anything. We're having a conversation. You keep saying that I throw out your evidence. You haven't given me any to throw out. So stop talking about it in the context of this conversation. Broadly speaking, the reason why the medical consensus on this issue is what I'm describing is not because of an elite group of SJWs pulling the strings. It's because there is an overwhelming amount of evidence defending the positions that I have. I mean, I don't know. Do you want to go through a dozen or 24 studies? I know that if I brought you the best, most verified meta-analyses in the world, you would still bring up Dr. Deborah So. I know that you just don't believe in the belief that there is certain evidence which is better than other evidence, okay? And I don't think you know enough about the subject to distinguish between the two. So I'm asking you why you believe woke people are shoving shit down your throat when everything I and other leftists advocate for is in line with the medical consensus.
Because it is your opinion that what your beliefs are in line with the medical consensus.
No, it's not. They're in the books. Yes, you can look in the DSM-5. It's all there.
Yeah. In the DSM-5, it actually says that gender dysphoria is a mental illness. So
yes,
I think we should probably, based on that, we should approach it a lot more carefully.
It is. And it's treated by transition.
That's not the only treatment option, but
what are the other ones?
That's like saying
wait, I'm sorry, have you read the DSM-5? What are the other ones?
I don't recall it off the top of my head.
Really?
I was just
Here, let me Google treatment for gender dysphoria.
And even if it did say that, I would say that's a bit of a like hyperbolic. Like the only way to treat gender dysphoria is to transition.
Medical treatment of gender dysphoria may include hormone therapy, such as feminizing hormone therapy or masculinizing hormone therapy, surgery, such as masculinizing or feminizing surgery, internal, external genitalia, facial features, and body contouring, otherwise known as transitioning. What
So
is
we
gender
agree.
dysphoria? From the American Psychiatric Association. The treatment for it is transitioning. Okay. Social affirmation, legal affirmation, medical affirmation, i.e. pubertal
Okay.
suppression, gender affirming hormone. Let me see how many medical organizations I can go down through before I find one that agrees with your
You're
perspective.
proving your point wrong.
How?
Because you said that the only way to the only treatment for it was transitioning, and you just listed like 5 different treatment options.
The only
So you just
medical
proved your
treatment
point
for
wrong.
it is transitioning.
So
Obviously,
hormone
social
blockers aren't medical?
hormone blockers are medical, but
It's
social
interesting to me.
wait. Social transitioning is still transitioning.
Okay.
So transitioning, yeah.
Well, that's a technicality, but sure. I'll
No,
give you
it's
that.
transitioning. That's what you do.
I'm
All the
agreeing with
doctors
you. Yes,
agree on
yes,
this.
I'm agreeing with you. But your original argument was the only treatment was to transition. You
That's
just gave me
everything
like
I
5
just
more.
described. What did I just describe that's not transitioning?
What do you mean? What did you just describe that was on
What
transitioning?
did I just say that wasn't transitioning?
Huh?
Everything that I just described was transitioning.
Social affirmation is not.
That's social transitioning. Here, we can Google. Social transitioning trans people. This is getting people to call you by your preferred pronouns, name, how you present, that sort of thing. There are 2 different types of transition: social transition and medical transition. Social transition may include coming out to your friends and family as transgender, so on and so forth. Medical transition, we've already talked about that. This is just medical consensus.
I mean, it kind
Why
of
is this
is.
bad?
I mean,
Like, you
it
have
is
such a
medical
strong
consensus,
opinion.
but it's not all the medical consensus.
No, of course, there's Dr. Deborah So. I know.
No,
But
I
how
don't even
long?
think she's made a study.
What?
I don't even think Dr. Deborah So has made a
Why do
study,
you-
has she?
So wait, hold on. There is like a broken lever in your brain. You can't possibly believe that you can just ignore reality because there's one naysayer. Do you believe in climate change?
Obviously.
Why? There are doctors who say it's not real.
So,
Why?
are you this dumb?
I have multiple studies from climate deniers. Some of them were even fired for
I'm
publishing
aware.
their arguments. Why?
Why what?
Why do you believe that why are you a globe
Because
head
the
too?
evidence is obviously better for global warming.
So
than it
wait,
is
you're
against.
wait. So you're saying that dozens of official institutions employing thousands of professionals producing study after study after study might be a good way of understanding complex geological, meteorological, and perhaps medical problems.
If you go back and listen to this video, I've never disagreed with you about that.
Okay. So shouldn't we listen to the experts when it comes to the treatment of trans children?
Sure, if they were all in agreement.
What do you mean all in agreement? We're not all in
Majority
agreement
in
on climate change.
I know.
So
That's why
so wait, should we not do anything about climate change because we're not all in agreement?
Nope.
What?
No.
No what?
No, we shouldn't do anything about climate. We should not do anything about climate change.
So we
since we're not
should
all
do
in agreement.
something.
Yes.
Why? There are people who disagree with the official narrative.
Do you not understand that?
I don't understand a fucking thing right now, man. You're going to have to help me. You're saying that we shouldn't believe the doctors or implement policies based on their beliefs because there are people who disagree, but you don't hold that belief true to climate change. I genuinely don't think you have like a consistent internal thought process. I think you've just been told what things to care about and you post hoc justify it. Like, you're a nice guy. I enjoy talking to you, but it's really obvious you don't have a consistent system for determining what you believe.
You know, that's if I can like it's interesting that you would say that because I think the same thing about people who claim to be leftists and vote for the establishment.
Oh God, it's folding in. The walls, they're closing in. Are you a troll?
I mean, like, no, I'm not. I'm confronting you in the most intellectually honest way that I know how, but I think you are a very intellectually dishonest person.
Okay, wait. A
And
lot
you-
of people
you
say
think
that.
the
A
same thing
lot of
about me,
people
I'm
say
sure.
that to me, but I usually find they're not able to substantiate those arguments. So run this through. So you don't believe we should implement policies based off the consensus of doctoral opinions because some disagree, but you do believe we should work on climate change because of the consensus of meteorological opinions, in spite of the fact that other people disagree. Do I have that correct?
Wouldn't you say some evidence is better than other evidence?
I would
yes,
readily say that. So you're arguing that the
I'm going to agree with that.
minority of fringe skeptics who have published
I'm not
information
arguing
criticizing trans people outweighs the overwhelming doctoral evidence produced by organizations across the planet.
No, I mean, gender dysphoria has only been like the person who discovered gender dysphoria, John Money, or the person who first originally started doing studies about it. That was not even very long ago, and there's not even that much information out there about trans as a
plenty
whole.
of information. Wait, so you just think that you're educated enough to be the arbiter on how valid the plurality? So wait, why do you think all the doctors and all these medical organizations adopted these practices then? Like, do you just think you're like smarter than all of them? Or like they're just very unskeptical? Like that's what medical organizations are known for, you know? They adapt immediately and they love change. That's how big institutional progress happens.
I would say that I think people can be wrong about certain things, and I think that social pressures can push them to make the wrong decisions. And I also think that a small amount of evidence on a topic that we generally don't know much about is not proof of, that side actually being correct. That would be my contention with the trans argument as far as evidence goes.
Do you believe in a flat earth?
Are you asking me seriously?
Can I red pill you in the flat earth? I feel like with 5 minutes, I could red pill you in the flat earth.
What do you mean red pill me?
Red pill, I think I can convince you. Do you think it's interesting that there are no direct flights that run from Brazil to Australia? They actually have to run around the long way, almost as though the world was flattened onto a grid and everything in the map.
What is that one thing you do? Have you heard of Alden something or other?
Well, what I'm describing... Oh, wait, you haven't heard of this? Hey, did you know that there have been... I'm not joking. Since the 1980s, 16 pilots, they've worked with Delta, United Airlines, even Saudi Air, who have gone missing after they've claimed that their flight paths were consistently deviating from ones consistent with the patterns of around Earth. That's pretty interesting. Did you know that?
Yeah, I think people can lie and bullshit.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes even institutions can lie and bullshit,
Indeed,
like
they can. And they can make studies that push their lies and bullshit, as well as press releases, as well as everything else.
All right. Well, do you have any final memes you wanna hit us up with?
Well, the one thing that I like, since you said my beliefs aren't internally consistent, which I'm sure I do have some beliefs that are not internally consistent. I'm sure we all do. I always, one of the things I like most about conversations like this is when people point out things that I am not internally consistent about. And sadly, I don't think you pointed out many of them today. I think you've mostly given me semantic arguments. And, this is what I wanted to talk to you about, because I find it interesting that people disagree so much on the evidence that they're actually presented. And I was wondering if I would be able to sway you at all in like, maybe do you think that the people you disagree with think the same about your evidence that you think about their evidence?
Why would I care what people I disagree with?
That is completely acceptable too. But the difference is the people that are on the right aren't really trying to codify into law things that force you to do what they believe.
They are literally trying to make illegal abortion. They are Donald Trump put 10 years if you deface a statue. Barr was looking into sedition. Barr was looking into sedition laws for BLM protesters. These are incredible violations of our constitutional rights, which go literally leagues beyond anything you've managed to blubber out in the past 3 hours. These are real threats to our real constitutional rights, real impositions to our First Amendment rights being implemented or proposed by the highest people in power. And that, to you, is not legislating morality, but doctors doing the things that are standard of care that have been established through literally hundreds of studies. That's actually the woke mob forcing morality on you.
Well, the abortion thing is definitely legislating morality. I don't think that somebody, saying that the Black Lives Matter movement is un-American is essentially trying to shove his beliefs down anybody's throat.
He's the president. What do you think shoving beliefs down somebody's throat means? Legislating morality?
forcing somebody to basically do what you want them to do
So
through
legislating
force.
morality. You mean legislation?
I mean, yeah, basically. I
So
mean,
just
anything that the
legislation.
government of anything
Like
that
bar?
at the end of the day the government is going to have to enforce.
You mean bar and sedition? You mean Donald Trump sending federal troops into Portland against the wishes of both the mayor and the governor? You mean Donald Trump saying that people who burn the flag should be deported?
Wait, what is the sedition? It's
No,
because
I know where you get your news from. You can Google it if you want. Look,
well, I did Google the word sedition.
It's okay. I know you. I understand that your political opinions have been informed 100% by the fear of the woke mob and 0% by any actual empirical things that are happening in reality. Look, okay, I appreciate you coming on. You've actually talked with me quite a bit longer than I expected you to, and I genuinely appreciate that. And I did enjoy the conversation. But I am being so incredibly sincere when I say that you... Oh yeah, what about the 1776 Project? One of Trump's 2020 campaign goals is literally to force a patriotic education of the citizenry. That's literally Nazi shit. Like federal authority implementing pro-government...
absolutely agree.
Oh, but I know. It's absolutely agreed.
You're also doing the same thing.
We need him
whataboutism
to defend against the woke mob. I know. Look,
I don't think it's to defend. I think it's just bullshit that he's doing, and I don't think it's to defend against the woke mob.
It's literally leagues of magnitude worse than anything any Democrat has tried to do in like the past 40 years. I'd argue this would even worse than the crime bill. Like for domestic policy, forcing education standards that are highly nationalist and highly politically weighted, that is the bedrock of a fascist government. That is literally step one. You make sure the next generation grows up in lockstep with you. That is incredibly dangerous. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting through. Okay, I appreciate you coming on. Please re-examine some of your priors here, okay? Because I feel like this country is literally fucking doomed if people like you can vote, okay? So please, God.
Can I ask, or can I say one thing?
Sure.
Like my closing argument or closing speech, whatever you would like to call it.
Go for it.
I specifically came here today to debate with you about not about any individual specific thing, as you can obviously tell, since I was completely unprepared to do that, and I offered you almost no evidence to back up any of my claims. Agreement there. I specifically came in to talk to you about specifically what Tim's argument against the woke mob is almost essentially the same as mine, which is I don't like the idea of people forcing their opinions / beliefs down other people's throats. And I know you'll say that's unfounded. You're scared of the woke mob, blah, blah, blah. You have no actual blah, 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 any argument. If I wanted to argue about specifics, I have with many people, and it's back and forth, and it accomplishes literally nothing. Just literally nothing. It's whataboutism back and forth. Like, Republicans do this, that's racist and fucked up. Democrats do this, that's racist and fucked up. Well, this side's fucked up, that side's it's just, I really don't see what that actually accomplishes. But specifically, as a libertarian, and since you call yourself a libertarian too, I figured you would have some sort of moral issue with forcing things that can't be factually proven down other people's throats.
That's
of course inflammatory language.
Wait, law is literally codifying morality. So you
and we specifically, like, that's why I'm progressive on a lot of issues, because I disagree with Republicans on many issues, marijuana being one of them. And that's why I said policy-based arguments I would agree with you about on 90% of them. But I am really against this opinionated bullshit and shoving it down the other side's throat and cudgeling them over the head.
Stop using that throat. It doesn't mean it. Or stop using those words. It doesn't mean anything. You're gonna get me with it too. Shoving when the mailman shoves his opinions down my throat when he says Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. What? I don't know what you mean.
I mean, forcing other people to do what you want them to do.
Forcing? Like through law? If that's the case, just say policy. But you weren't able to bring up any policy. You didn't have a problem with what the schools were doing, and then you didn't even have a problem with what the doctors are doing. We did it for 2 hours, and you couldn't think of any example of legislative morality, but you shove aside examples of Republicans doing it. We lead through these topics, and over, your problem is like this nebulous, people are being too culturally woke about it. We obviously
isn't.
aren't
I mean,
much of
I
a
brought
threat
up-
to you. We are clearly not in as much of a disagreement as you think we are, if you are so inept at finding examples of the threat we pose to your way of life.
I'm not inept. I just told you I don't see what it actually accomplishes to go through examples one by one, especially when I bring up an example and you're like, I went through their shit. They're just retarded. And then you just completely throw the person's arguments away.
You didn't bring up their arguments. You just brought up their name.
Yeah. And do you think it would have mattered if I brought up their arguments?
I could explain to you why their arguments are bad.
Why do you think I care about your opinion of why they're retarded?
Because it's not an opinion. I could give you arguments.
Okay.
I wouldn't just say it. Wait. Do you know the difference between saying an opinion and substantiating
Obviously,
an
I
opinion?
do.
Okay.
Why do you always consider your opponents arguing in bad faith?
I don't think you're arguing in bad faith. I just don't know if our cognitive... I think our chakras aren't aligned. Okay, look.
Yeah, I know you think conservatives are subhuman, so...
Well, I think they're wrong, and I think they either have to be stupid or malicious. So, I mean...
Well, if you don't think they think the same thing about you, and of course you probably
I don't care what they think.
of-
The point of my channel is to substantiate my beliefs. I wouldn't just say it. I make the arguments. The only reason I'm cocky enough to make arguments like that, the only reason I'm arrogant enough to say stuff like conservatives are all dumb fucks, is because I've spent literally thousands of hours on this channel going through their arguments, and they're dog shit. Like, I would only do that if I felt confident that I could defend my positions, and I would.
Actually, in the distributionism argument, you remember that guy?
Who?
Distributionism. I'm
The
completely
distributionist?
slurring the word for some reason. But
The distributionist? Yeah, that guy's a white nationalist. Some logs leaked of that guy. He was fucking crazy.
One of the things you did in the argument with him is you asked him if he agreed with egalitarianism, and he said, no, I don't believe in egalitarianism, which is a somewhat dumb thing to say to begin with. But you asked him if you think you should shoot for, that sort of outcome. And he said, of course we should shoot, we should shoot for making things more equal. But you eventually pinned him down to a straw man version of, because he originally said he wasn't for...
I can't get on the specifics of an argument I had 2 years ago. I mean, I don't remember.
I understand. I'm just bear with me for like 2 minutes. Less than that, 45 seconds. Sorry. You defined egalitarian for him in your own way. And because he originally said that he doesn't believe that we can reach that height of egalitarianism, aka making everything equal, you basically ascribe the motive to him that he didn't believe in egalitarianism at all in any way. And that would mean that he was, a terrible person because he didn't believe in making the world more equal, which I would basically agree. If he did say that, that would be a terrible thing to say, because why wouldn't you want to make the world more equal? That's just obvious to me, and I'm sure obvious to you too. But I've seen that in that argument with him and a few other arguments you've done, where you basically you ascribe a motive to them, then you attack that motive, which is a version of straw man arguing. And with me, you did reduction to absurdity multiple times. You straw man my points multiple times, and you also what's the other one?
I don't think you know these fallacies well enough to accuse me of using them.
Well, there's another one that you probably do to dehumanize the opponent, or just to assume that they know nothing compared to you. But
I mean, if your general criticism is that I'm arrogant, my only response to that could be, if conservatives could give me a reason not to be, I would be, then that would change. But yeah.
Well, not unknowledgeable, because you clearly are very, very intelligent. I would give you that. I would say that you are disingenuous in the way that you argue.
I try my best. Okay. I think I said final meme 10 minutes ago, so we have to wrap it up.
That's fine.
Okay. I love you, buddy. I hope you know that.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
You live in the U.S., right?
Yes. Okay. I'm on the other side of the continent as you. I'm in New Jersey.
You're in New Jersey? Oh, thank God.
Yes.
Okay. Your votes don't count then. Oh, okay. Listen, I love you. Be well, okay?
Cool, but yes.
All right. Stay strong.
See ya, dude.
Bye. Oh, God. I'm sweating over it. That's the rhetorical equivalent of running a marathon. Holy shit. Oh, my God. That went on so long, I forgot I had a cough. Holy fuck. Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, I feel like I have to towel off or something. Yeah, that went, oh God. This is the problem that I have. You can do all the arguments in the world. At the end of the day, some people, I don't even think that guy was, I actually genuinely don't think that guy was stupid. I just don't think that guy has developed the mental, the faculties, or like the cognitive processes to distinguish reality from not. But I have no idea. I have no idea. I genuinely don't. But I appreciate that he spoke with me. Because... fuck.